Okay, well, welcome back. Now we're going to start part 2 of our work afternoon meetings. It's going to be the work session of Las Cruces City Council. Today is Monday, October 26th, 2020. It's approximately 2:25 p.m. So the first item is going to be our pet of the week. And Ms. Jennifer Martinez from our communications office is going to introduce our pet.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Let me share my screen with you first of all. Let's see here. You're able to see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Jennifer Martinez with the city's communications office, and today I would like to introduce you to Kai. Kai is energetic and enthusiastic, and he is searching for an outgoing family that can match his youthful energy. He is adventurous and curious, constantly finding himself in fun and exciting situations. And then we have Pinky. Pinky is a bit shy when she meets new people, but that changes when she spends more time with you. Pinky loves walks and is great on a leash. She's very gentle, especially with treats, and she hopes to find a family that is willing to shower her with love, ear scratches, and much more. And you can meet both of those at the Animal Service Center of the Mesa Valley. The hours of operation are Monday through Friday, noon to 6 p.m., and on Saturday and Sunday, noon to 5 p.m. You will be asked to call the number on the bottom of the screen, 3820018, to make an appointment to meet with those animals. Right now, off-site adoption events are still canceled until further notice, but if you're interested in adoptions, you can go online, ascmv.org/adoptions. The cost per animal is $25. You'll go ahead and look for that animal number, call to make an appointment, and voila, you can go meet your next family member. Right now, the Animal Service Center is looking for donations of kennels or crates. Right now, dog sweaters, blankets, those without filling, and no sleeping bags, please. Collars, leashes, and towels. And you can drop off those items during normal hours of operation or at the door if they are closed. And the Communications Office takes this opportunity to discuss COVID-19 related items today. In addition to encouraging you to wear your mask in light of record positive numbers in our county, I want to help the Community Engagement Office help families to learn about ways to celebrate Halloween safely. You can learn about Spooky Las Cruces, which is this Saturday, October 31st. There's a series of events. At 10 a.m., you can pick up activity kits at the museums on Main Street, on the Main Street entrance, virtual Facebook event at 2 o'clock, and then a drive-through trick-or-treat that takes place from 5 to 8 p.m. with Las Cruces Police Department in the parking lot of the Mesa Valley Mall. You can get more information at los-cruces.org/Halloween. Thank you very much, Mayor. Have a great afternoon.
Mayor, I want Pinky.
What?
Want Pinky.
Okay, well, there you go. So, Jennifer, can you deliver Pinky to Mayor Pro Tem's house?
ascmv.org/adoptions. Make an appointment.
No, you don't want to do that. When you have someone who wants it right now, we'll just make sure you just drop by.
I've been saying that she's wanted that type of pet, huh?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, David.
This is David Allen for the record. I just wanted to correct one thing. Due to a positive test or positive exposure at the Animal Service Center that happened today, they've had to close down the facility to the public and are working on rescheduling appointments and are cleaning the facility again. They are going to be contacting current appointee holders and working to reschedule them to a later date. So that's the things that we lived in, and that just came out late this afternoon. So I wanted the public to be aware that they aren't taking and seeing the public today, and they'll issue a new press release when they're back to the new normal operations. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that update, David. I appreciate it. Okay, so next we're going to go to Jobs of the Week, and Ms. Darlene Lopez will give us that information.
Mr. Mayor, this is Francisco Payares for the record, Economic Development Department. Unfortunately, Ms. Darlene Lopez will not be able to provide it today since the meeting started a bit later, but I will be here introducing today's Jobs of the Week. We have a position open at the City of Las Cruces hiring a deputy city clerk. There's one position available, and that one closes on November the 4th. We also have mine maintenance technicians, and these are being hired by Intuitive Staffing. There's 4 positions available. These will be closing on November 21st. We have one physical therapist and one registered nurse with Tresco. These positions will be closing on the 20th of November. We also have landscaper with GNA Landscaping. There is one position available. This one will be closing on November 15th. We have technical writers, machinist, sewing machine pullers and operators at Alaska Structures, and there's 10 positions available right now. So these will remain open until filled. For a full list of jobs, internships, and volunteer opportunities, please visit employnm.com, and you can also visit governmentjobs.com/careers/Las Cruces. And for more information with regards to Workforce Connections, the phone number is 575-524-6250, located at 226 South Alameda Boulevard. And again, the webpage is employnm.com. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Pallares. Okay, we have 3 items on the agenda. First one is going to be our 2021 legislative priorities and capital outlay requests. And we're going to have Amy Johnson-Basford and Larry Horan, our lobbyist, discuss. So I don't know who starts out first.
Good afternoon, Council, Mayor, Councilors. Amy Johnson-Basford, Grants Administrator, Larry Horan, our lobbyist, will be co-presenting today. Let me share the screen. I'll be managing our presentation during it, and hopefully I can get this open here for us. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes. Yes.
Great. So today we are going to be presenting the 2021 legislative session priorities for your consideration and to provide direction to the city staff. The legislative priorities are traditionally broken into 2 areas of focus: the policy priorities, which Larry will be discussing with you a little bit, and the capital outlay priorities, which will make up the bulk of our presentation today. Policy priorities are brought before council in a resolution form which states what the city's position is regarding a particular issue. We received direction from council and the city manager's office on the items to be placed in those resolutions. And generally those resolutions are put together by the city manager's office, in the past by our policy analyst, but I believe other staff members in the city manager's office will be doing those this year until we have a new policy analyst. They are then provided to the city's legislative representatives, as well as the governor. Our capital outlay priorities, these are brought before council in one resolution. This year we are scheduling that for December 7th. This is used to submit the request through the Legislative Counsel Service. And during the session, then our lobbyist, counselors and other key staff work with the legislators to encourage funding of our priorities. One note I want to make for the council this year is a new process that was put in place last year by the Legislative Counsel Service for community organizations. Those organizations must notify the city's Grants Administration Office if they are looking to seek legislative funding in the upcoming session and provide required documentation. The Legislative Counsel Service is now having 2 requirements be in place for these community organizations prior to the start of the legislative session, and that is that a current fiscal agent agreement is in place with the city, which defines that we are willing to be the the fiscal agent for that legislative appropriation, and that the project that is being requested for funding meets anti-donation criteria, as well as will provide a public benefit. It also requires that the city or municipality that they are requesting this from is willing to accept ownership of any improvements that will be created in the city by that community organization's capital outlay. Those requests also have to be on the state ICIP list for the 2021 legislative session, and I'll discuss that in a little bit. Council will be presented with these requests prior to the start of the session, most likely the second meeting of December, possibly the first meeting of January, to confirm that these organizations have met the above criteria. That does not mean that they become priorities for the city as such, but that the city is willing to be the fiscal agent and accept the responsibilities that go along with that. So this year, I'm going to have Larry discuss the next couple of slides about what he foresees as happening in the 2021 legislative session. Larry, if you'll go ahead.
Sure. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. It's good to be in front of you. Unfortunately, still virtually. Look forward to next time I get to come see you down in the city council chambers. This upcoming session is a 60-day legislative session, meaning the legislators can introduce legislation on any topic.
Excuse me, Larry. I'm sorry for interrupting. I just need you to state your name, please. I know we introduced you, but I need you to state
I
your name.
apologize, Mayor. Larry Horan, lobbyist for the city of Las Cruces. So going into this session, although I think we're all probably excited for the election season to be over next week, we're really waiting to determine how it's going to impact the state legislature, because all 112 legislators are already up for re-election or election this year. And so we're really waiting to see what happens with the makeup of both the Senate and the House, both political makeup and then also leadership makeup, because there's some significant changes as we discussed in meetings we've had with you earlier, including the chairman of the Finance Committee will be new, as will the President Pro Tem of the Senate. And so it's really difficult to figure out exactly what kind of big policy issues are going to come up, because you mix that in with what's going on with COVID, and the legislators have not really decided how they are going to convene in January. When they had their special session in June, it was a virtual session as far as access by any of the public was concerned, but legislators participated in a combination of virtually and in person. And so with the 60-day session, and we'll go down into some of these big policy issues that they're going to consider, they're going to have to determine how they're going to allow for interaction that doesn't violate the public health order that will be in place at the time, as well as deal with legislative issues. And some of these issues are really big policy changes. And so the public and interested parties are really going to want to be able to participate in some manner. And so at this point, everything is really up in the air. And we'll talk a little bit about budget, because that has a big impact on it. As we talked before, because of the COVID crisis and the oil, the plunging of consumption and also cost of oil, the state's really looking at a potential budget deficit, although the range of revenues is swinging from around $6.5 billion to $7.3 billion, just depending on what happens with COVID and what happens at the federal level. So we're really going in more blind than normal, even at this time of year. So big policy issues, and I know we've had a couple of resolutions that have already passed, including local regulation of tobacco products. That a resolution's already been passed that the city council's already taken a position on funding the study on water management of the Rio Grande. And there was some funding received for a pilot project in the last session. It was cut in the special session, but we did receive funding to look at that issue for a pilot project. Legalization of cannabis certainly will be on the legislators' agenda. To get the most up-to-date information, I touched base with the lobbyists for Drug Policy Alliance today. They do not have a draft that is yet ready for prime time, but they do anticipate that there will be appetite in both the House and the Senate for consideration of a cannabis legislation. It'll be similar to what it was last time, but there will be some changes, and some of those could impact us at the local level, meaning how much funding local governments get, and then whether or not there's a determination or an area of funding that they would like to have from those tax revenues. The Tort Reform and Civil Rights Commission recommendations kind of go hand in hand. The Civil Rights Commission is meeting every 2 weeks to make recommendations for the legislature related to a creation of a new cause of action for a civil rights violation by public employees. Most of the focus is on law enforcement and law enforcement civil rights violations, but it's possible that recommendation will include any civil rights violation by any public employee, and it would allow that a cause of action to be brought in state court. Of particular concern, just for monitoring to determine how it's going to impact local governments, is there's discussion of inclusion of punitive damages, an elimination or an expanding of the tort claims cap for compensatory damages, and also possible attorney's fees. So if that happens, if we have a civil rights cause of action and a bad outcome for one of our citizens, it's going to have an impact on the city's budget and also how the city is going to manage that risk. And so that's something we're keeping a close eye on, and then also trying to determine what's the best stance to take, because there's lots of ways that we can help make the system better, along with the potential civil rights cause of action that we may want to consider in the coming legislative session. Elimination of income tax on Social Security for retirees. That I would imagine that will come up again. It's going to be very hard in a session where we have a budget shortfall to create any new or eliminate any tax revenue. Although this is a popular topic for legislators and also for many people throughout the state, it's a tough road to hoe when you have a budget gap and you're looking to reduce tax revenue for the state. And then the resolution for the Coalition of Sustainable Communities recommendations, I do see that the council passed a resolution in support of that. And I think there may be one more slide, Amy.
Yes.
Capital funding availability, we still don't know. As we've talked before, when you have a year with budget shortfalls, the legislature has handled capital outlay in lots of ways. We've had years where they have had no funding available for any capital outlay projects. They've also determined that they'll only fund statewide or state capital projects, and so individual legislators do not have any funding available, or we could just see a dramatic reduction in capital outlay funding that's available during the legislative session. So based upon that and the discussions we've had, the recommendation is we try and identify what we consider to be true infrastructure projects, public safety, public health, water, those type of areas for funding in the event that there is any capital outlay funding available. I look back at the latest revenue estimates that were just released to the legislature and the Legislative Finance Committee, and capital outlay comes from the Severance Tax Permanent Fund and the revenue that comes from there. And currently, oil production is down anywhere between 70 and 75% this year over last year, and the rig counts are down. So we don't have consumption, and we don't have very many oil rigs operating, and so we may have very little, or it's entirely possible we'll have no funding available for capital outlay. Although it's always good for us to identify our capital funding priorities, because no matter if it's for this year or for next year, it's good to have legislators continue to have the discussion with us about what we're trying to do with our infrastructure funding and our capital. And so even though it may be frustrating if there's no funding available, it's still good for us to go through the exercise so we can continue to work towards funding of some of these projects through the out years. And through the staff and council has always been very good in helping to engage in conversations with legislators about what our priorities are. And every year we try and have at least the Las Cruces Day lunch, where the city of Las Cruces sponsors lunch for legislators. I don't know, this may be the first year we're not able to do that if we're in a virtual session, but what we will do is we will work to engage council as appropriate and as also as to your desired role in speaking with legislators and staff to answer questions and push for our priorities. But although Las Cruces it's a long haul to get to Santa Fe, we have had very good success when we have staff and counselors come up and just visit with legislators during the session, and we always try and do it at a time where the timing makes sense, meaning they've already learned about our priorities and they're about to fund our requests, and so we try and hit them at the right time. And I know that's kind of a quick snapshot of what we're looking at this session. The other thing that to be concerned about is and we've had some discussions I've had discussions with the new city manager and staff, is to adopt a general policy resolution from the city that would include things like monitor legislation that may create an unfunded mandate to the city, or would anything that would deteriorate our home rule authority, protect local revenues, things like that. Because in a time when the state's at a budget shortfall, we have to be careful that they don't try and tap into some of the revenues that local governments have and use our revenues to balance their balance the state budget. And most recently, we have been seeing that as it relates to hold harmless distributions to local government. Nothing has happened to indicate that they're going to do that, but it's always something that we have to be wary of and watch for. And I'll kick it back to you, Amy. And as always, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Larry. Amy Johnson-Basfer, Grants Administrator again.
Excuse me, Amy, before
Yes.
you go on, let me, looks like Councilor Vasquez has a quick question and Councilor Flores. So they may have a question of Larry Haran. Councilor Vasquez?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do have a question here for Larry. I also have a question that I can save for later for Amy, but I'll start with Larry. Larry, are you aware of the estimated percentage of legal cannabis revenues that would come to the state, perhaps in a first-year projection?
Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, no, that's part of what, when I was having a discussion with the representative from Drug Policy Alliance today, that's part of what they're still, that is still in draft form on the legislation. So they have not said what the amount percentage-wise of revenue that would go to local governments or how they would spend, because in previous legislation, it had a percentage, and it also, it had a particular programs that had to be funded with that revenue. That's what they are still determining as they draft their legislation. So as soon as we have that and have the legislation, I'll be able to give you a much better answer to that question.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Follow-up question to that, but first to your point, I think if there's an opportunity for us to advocate for a specific percentage for a municipal set aside on the taxes collected on legal cannabis, it seems like that's maybe a conversation we should be involved in now. And the second follow-up question to that is, in terms of total revenue to the state from legalized cannabis, do you have a specific number on the total revenue and X amount million of dollars from, enacting this legislation in the first year would bring X amount of dollars to New Mexico?
Mayor and Councilor Vasquez, I don't have that now, but I'll be happy to follow up on that and see if they have those preliminary projections yet, based on what their revenue percentage would be. And as a follow-up to your first question, I would presume, but that's why I asked, because I'd like to get direction from council, is that we want as high of a percentage as possible, and then also local control, meaning the council would have control over where those revenues were spent. Less prescriptive as related to where the funds are spent, but also as high a percentage as we can get. But I do pose that as a question just to make sure that I'm on the right track.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that, Larry. I appreciate that. I did hear one really interesting statistic that I want to share with the council and with you, Larry, in terms of where that revenue would come from. Because there's been a lot of talk about, well, if all that revenue comes from inside of the state, essentially we're not generating those economic-based dollars. If folks are just reprioritizing what they're spending money on to spend money on legal cannabis for recreational use, then it kind of the conversation around economic impact gets a little bit different. But in the study that I heard during the Tax and Rev state legislative committee just a couple of weeks ago, they're projecting that 40% of cannabis sales would be attributed to the state of Texas. So people from Texas would amount to 40% of the market, which of course would be out of state dollars being generated and spent here in our community. And, I want to say that because we talked about this, I think in the last 2 years, at least, that I've been on the council, and have voted in favor as a body to support this at the state level. And 40%, considering how the population of Texas, and also considering a small percentage perhaps out on the southeast part or the eastern part of the state, but really El Paso is going to be the largest driver of the market for cannabis, which means Doña Ana County stands to have probably the largest, if not one of the largest percentage of revenue generated from legal cannabis, which is significant to us here in Las Cruces. So that's a lot of money. Of course, the law would dictate that folks would have to consume the product here in state. But because the governor has prioritized this and has talked about this numerous times this year, the makeup of the Senate has changed, and that some of the, I think, opponents to this will no longer be in the session. Some key opponents to this will no longer be in the legislature. You know, I'm sensing there's a real possibility of finally getting this done. And so, you know, I think whether we agree with it or not, or folks agree with it or not, philosophically, being prepared for that windfall of an economic development opportunity and revenue is really important, because we don't want to miss that boat. If it's going to happen, you know, I think we need to be prepared. And so, you know, I think one of the things I'd like us to consider doing, if the council agrees, is to bring back another resolution in support of this, to indicate the council support, if indeed there is support, majority support on the council for this, and again, to really, you know, start thinking about this as an economic development opportunity, because that, I don't know what millions of dollars that amounts to, but in terms of generating jobs, generating local GRT, I mean, of course, Sunland Park's going to be doing probably pretty good. Mayor Perea should be like the spokesperson for this, if he's in agreement with it, just because of its proximity to El Paso. But Las Cruces stands to gain really big from cannabis legalization. And so, you know, I just want us to kind of start thinking about that in terms of the impact, if it's going to happen anyway. Like I said, whether you oppose it or support it, being ready to have those job creators, and not just that, but the production. You know, we gave recently those LEDA funds to 420, gosh, I forget the rest. Yeah, 420 Valley, which, although they are producing, you know, obviously commercial grade CBD, I think really the business plan there is they're waiting for cannabis legalization to start producing that, which is going to make more revenue for them. But, you know, as we talk about transitioning to lower water use crops, or, you know, figuring out what we do with our agriculture industry in the face of water scarcity, I think we also have a huge opportunity to also lead in the production. And so, again, if it's going to happen anyway, we could be a real state leader in this, and we could really have a lot of dollars coming into our community. And so thinking about that is going to be important. So just some general comments on that. Larry, anything that you might want to add just on the potential for this to pass in this legislative session, the way that you're reading the politics in Santa Fe?
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor Vasquez. And just as a follow-up, while I was able to reach out to the drug policy representative, just ask him that question, we do not yet know current potential revenues. That's something they have not been able to determine. So I'll keep up on that. And as soon as we have any kind of potential or preliminary numbers, I'll be sure to provide that information to you. So just as a follow-up, they don't have it yet because they're in preliminary stages. But Councilor, I think your assessment is accurate about the legislature and the makeup. The only thing that is, although I don't know how much of an impact it would be, depending on who you talk to in the Senate, the Republicans think they're going to gain seats. And if they gain seats and it makes it close, that could have an impact on legalization, although I'm not sure how many seats they would be able to gain. They have 26 to 16. And some of those contested seats that are now currently held by Republicans in Albuquerque, they are actually thinking may flip to the Democrats. So the numbers may not be much different than they are now. And just based on the nature of the legislature, those who aren't going to be there anymore, I think there is a very good chance that legalization will pass this session. And if it does, that it will be signed by the governor.
Great. Thank you, Larry. And one more quick question for you, or maybe just a consideration to think about in lieu of not being able to lobby in Santa Fe this year, and probably little to no capital outlay dollars, but certainly perhaps some policy priorities that we might have on the council. You know, if there's ever an opportunity to have counselors join you in those meetings with legislators, especially if we're talking about projects that overlap in legislative districts with city council districts, I think that might be a good thing to consider doing. And, you know, I think something that we've kind of have started informally doing as counselors, starting at least a couple years back when, you know, I started reaching out to folks whose districts overlapped with mine to talk about capital outlay and kind of some mutual projects that we could both support. You know, if that's a strategy that is helpful, that you think is helpful, Larry, I think might be something good for us to consider in lieu of perhaps going up there, you know, to do one-on-one meetings in person. So just a thought on that.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor. And actually, what I will say is although I interact with legislators regularly and provide them with a lot of information, they still prefer to hear from you all as members of the council and from their constituents. So it's very helpful. And the more, and part of what we tried to do with our strategy this year, and we always continue to try and refine, the more we can have collaborative project development between the city council and the legislators. So it's a project that you want, it's a project that the legislators want, and it's good for the constituents. It's a much easier sell. And that's also true as related to policy issues. So I'm always happy to help facilitate your participation in those discussions. And it carries a lot of weight. It's even more weight when it's in person because for you to come visit with them in Santa Fe really takes a time commitment and a commitment into your other priorities. But we're learning that there's lots of different ways to communicate because of COVID, and so I think that's a great idea. It's something that we've had some discussions with. We're also going to have some new legislators in Las Cruces, and so having some of those introductory meetings is a good way for us to continually talk to them about the priorities of the city and the city council. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry. And the last thing, Mayor, is if possible, before we wrap up this item, we'd just like to see if there's consensus in the council to have a resolution brought forward that supports legalized recreational cannabis in the 2021 legislative session, so that perhaps we can start working on that if there is consensus. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Larry.
Okay, Counselor. Yeah, I'm sure there is. Of course, you know I'll be against it, but you guys have me outnumbered. Counselor Flores.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Haran. So I just when you said that we should, these I think almost verbatim, this is a verbatim quote almost, I think, to adopt it, that the city council, you recommended that the city council adopt a general policy to protect local revenue and our home rule authority, and also to have that was an add-on, but that was almost a direct quote from my scribbly handwriting. And then you also added that there should be we should also adopt a policy to have less prescriptive directives from the legislature as to where revenues are spent. And what prompts you to say that? I mean, does it look that scary? They're trying to take our money away, or would it be retrospective, prospective? What all did you mean by that?
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor Flores. So, as a general rule, and we'll run into issues, and I can think of a few specific off the top of my head, but one of the most somewhat recent one where we're talking about home rule authority. So, as a home rule municipality, unless the legislature prohibits us from exercising a power, the city council has the authority to make determinations on how to utilize your general powers of governance. And so, for one example would be, as a home rule municipality, you can adopt your own procurement code versus having to follow the state's procurement code. And the city of Las Cruces has done that. So in the past, they've had legislation that would prescribe to the city certain areas within the procurement code that you would have to follow the state code rather than having the city council maintain that authority. And so that's why, so when we're talking about protecting home rule authority, generally for home rule municipalities, you want to maintain as much of that authority as you can at the local level rather than having the legislature prescribe that for you. And so that's one of those issues, because in a 60-day session, when there's less money, there's less legislation, but when there's a lot of money, you can have upwards of 2,000 or 2,500 pieces of legislation. And a lot of those can have an impact on a city government, because not only are you a local government or a city government, but you're also a large employer. You have to deal with workers' comp issues, tort claims, et cetera. So I generally recommend a policy statement from the council to protect your authority, and then you can make a decision how you think that certain policies should be implemented. And also a protection of local revenue sources, because when we're talking about things like cannabis, for instance, it's a good argument from local governments to say we're going to have to deal with a lot of the impacts, both positive and negative, with cannabis legalization, and so that's going to create a cost to the city. Your planning and zoning, your code enforcement, if you're going to have to issue business licenses, et cetera. And so you want to have a fair share of that revenue. And so, and also what has happened in the past with the state is if they're needing to find revenue, they'll look at local revenue sources that you're getting, either a portion of the gross receipts tax. For instance, when they repealed the food tax, whether that, not saying whether that was a good decision or not, but what they did was they took that local tax revenue. That's why they had to create those hold harmless payments, because you had no ability to decide, hey, what are you going to do with a big portion of our revenue? And so I generally recommend to a governing body and to the city council that you adopt a resolution just to give direction on how you want those kind of issues dealt with during the session. And so those are usually the three that come to mind the most.
What concerns me, Mr. Horan, is if the legislature decides to take our home rule authority, wouldn't that supersede any of, or preempt any resolution we might pass about how we think it would preempt a policy measure? The whole thing baffles me.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor. If they actually passed and enacted the legislation, yes, then you would lose the authority over whatever that particular aspect would be. But when you're adopting policy resolutions, you're signaling to the legislature as an elected body that you generally are going to not like, you generally are going to want to maintain your home rule authority. You would prefer to keep that decision making at your level, and you're saying, instead of you doing that to us, let us make those decisions as we see best to govern. So yes, if they do preempt you, for instance, you would be preempted, much as the states would be with federally. But it gives direction to the legislators, so then we can represent and say, we don't want you to do this because we think you're infringing on what we think should be local authority. So it's more of a direction from council.
And true. So say the legislature was to pass such a statute that takes away our home rule authority and other things that you've mentioned. The governor, let's see. Well, they would have to pass something that would, okay. No, I'm just wondering if the governor has any superpowers in this regard. Do you know, Mr. Horan?
Mayor and Councilor, no, it would have to be enacted through legislation, but that would give the direction to make a decision on what position to take on any of that particular legislation. I'll go back to the procurement example because this was a real example. We opposed at the time the legislation that would have imposed a particular restriction on us on how we dealt with architectural services primarily. And the city opposed it because it would have eroded your home rule authority. But we enacted a similar provision in our own procurement code because the city thought it was a good policy idea, but they didn't think it was a good idea for it to be prescribed by the state. And so, no, there's no particular, they cannot do it to us without legislation that is passed by both houses and signed by the governor.
But I think what concerns me, Mr. Horan, is that it sounds as if you've heard something, some rumblings along these lines. So it sounds like you're saying, let's be, proactive instead of reactive. Is there some sort of talk about that?
Mayor and Council, no, there's nothing specific that is on the horizon now. When I'm talking about things that could happen, like when we're talking about budget issues and hold harmless, I bring those up because when we've been in similar times in the past several years, we've had those threats to our ability to maintain our revenues and also our authority. So it's more of using a historical perspective to see issues that could arise.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much for that explanation. That really helps me see the whole picture. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ryan, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Beta Stupy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Larry. I've got just a couple questions here. One of them, as you noted, we will be seeing changes in different types of leadership throughout both of the reps and for senators. With that in mind, what kind of suggestions would you have or things that we ought to consider to make sure that Las Cruces and, Southern New Mexico continues to have a strong voice, especially when we do have to compete against Albuquerque, and they have us on numbers for everything. So what type of things do you think we need to consider?
Thank you, Councilor and Mayor and Councilor Abeyta-Stube. First thing we do, and what I would suggest, and we've had some of these discussions, is as soon as we know for sure who the new legislators are going to be from the Las Cruces area, that we set up, and depending on what the best way is, small meetings with them and myself, councilors as appropriate, and also city staff, so that they can learn about municipal issues, learn about the city's issues and our priorities, and take that as a good opportunity between next Tuesday and the beginning of the legislative session to start having those conversations and have those dialogues. Because what you really want to have is, as something comes up, you want them to think of us and reach out to whomever they want to talk to with the city to find out what our position is on those issues. And so we definitely want to start to develop those relationships with our new legislators as quickly as possible. And then the tricky thing with leadership is those leadership decisions aren't going to be made until really the first day of the session. Although we'll have a good sense of what's going to happen, things can change all the way up into that first week of the session. And so that's a little tougher. But we need to continue with those who we do anticipate are going to be in leadership, start having those conversations. And I think another way that we can do it, and I think you may have had some good conversations with this, with organizations like the Municipal League, is increase our participation with those associations. Because with the city's active participation, like with the Municipal League, you're getting the benefit of all 106 municipalities helping you on some of these bigger policy issues. That doesn't help you on the money or the competition for capital outlay dollars, but it does help us in those big policy fights, because sometimes they like to hear from the bigger cities. They really don't like to hear from Albuquerque and Santa Fe as much, because of the Rio Grande corridor. Most of the legislators would prefer to hear from their constituents. And so using things like the Municipal League and having active participation and the ability to help set those policies at the league, that will help us a lot. And it gives us much more of a voice than just dealing with our own legislators. And so those are a few things that we can do to kind of help increase our ability and our sway with legislators.
Thank you. And with that in mind, I do want to point out, I know that our legislators have done so well with really communicating with each other, partnering up to do what's best and right for our community, and making every dollar stretch as much as it can for our communities. And so, looking forward to any new members, I'm sure they'll be working together just as well to make sure that we're able to get the needed services or infrastructure for our community. One item that I've kind of heard about that poses a bit of a concern for me is that of perhaps increasing claim caps for municipalities. And so that's an item that I just think needs to be on our radar. And like I said, causes me a bit of a pause as well. Have you heard much about that item?
Mayor and Councilor Abeyta-Stube, yes, and it's concerning. The Civil Rights Commission is meeting about every 2 weeks, and I've been going through, and any of those I haven't seen, I've been going back through the presentations and looking at the makeup of the commission. I think the recommendation that will come out is likely to include a creation of that new cause of action for a civil rights violation, which, depending on how they do it, will have an increase in caps and also an increase in probably damages and attorney's fees. And so I've been very active with the league, and also had discussions with the Association of Counties on how they're responding to that. The tricky thing is I also think that we may be able to come up with some recommendations for improvements in how local governments and law enforcement, and in particular, are providing the services to the community that help alleviate any potential civil rights cause of action. Because if you don't have the potential violation, then you don't have the risk of hitting the cap or having attorney's fees. And so a lot of the discussion we've been having kind of behind the scenes is, are there ways we can improve the overall system so that we are holding bad actors accountable? We know who they are. They're able to be taken out of the system so that they're not working for, a municipality or county. They're not, some law enforcement officers will move around. They'll have something bad happen if they're working for Las Cruces, and they'll go to a smaller community, and then you can have another incident. And, there's discussions about the law enforcement academy boards or ways that can be improved. And so I think what we're fleshing out now is what are some of those positive changes that we can advocate for to help improve the system overall, so that people are still held accountable. Victims are compensated appropriately as the courts decide, but also in a way that's going to be responsible to the local governments and your funding sources. And so there's a lot going on with that, and they have not made their recommendations yet, so we don't know what the answer is going to be, but we're all very nervous about what it may look like.
Okay. Thank you. And as we move forward, I know I had one other item that I was going to chat about, but it escapes me at this moment. I want to just thank you. I know that we had a really robust conversation together, and I do appreciate that. I think there's a lot that we can do and work with. Obviously, this is going to be a very different year on how everything looks like, especially when working remotely. I know that there was even some, internet access issues for some legislators. I'm assuming that all of our people have the right equipment, tools, are being, given equal opportunities for that access when it comes to computers, internet, everything like that is needed for those types of sessions. Because like I said, I know that there was some significant issues even during the interims that if you get disconnected or can't be there for a vote. And so that's just something that I think is just a concern. And I know that our people do the best that they can, but what types of perhaps improvements or processy changes are happening at the legislature to help with that?
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor. And unfortunately, I'm not sure a lot has changed since they tried to do it during the special session, where not only did they have issues with voting, but the website crashed a couple of times. They had to switch to Facebook. They're having a hard time even with the press conferences. And so the reality is their focus right now is on the election season. I would anticipate they'll have much more robust discussions about exactly how they're going to have the session happen after next Tuesday. But that is a concern, and I'm concerned about it. I mean, I've had the opportunity to be on a few of these meetings with the city, and you all do a very good job of making sure the public has access, everybody can see it, it doesn't crash. Legislature isn't so good, and so I know there are a lot of people who are concerned about that. In fact, Chairwoman Lundstrom, who's chair of the House Appropriations Committee, has even indicated that they should consider just passing a budget and then adjourning and not considering any big policy issues until they can meet in person. And so I don't think that will happen because there's 112 of them and they're going to want to be making some policy decisions. But I would imagine that would be some of the scope of what they're talking about. But legislators are still worried about it as well. So unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you. I know that they're going to have to tackle that, but that's something that they haven't made any significant strides on as of yet.
Thank you. And as much as I want there to be tons of capital outlay funding, I know what the reality looks like. When we talked, I know I had divided things into a wants versus needs. And I think that's kind of an approach that I will take as we move forward to see what's happening and what is absolutely necessary that we need. For me, it was infrastructure items, and flooding, maintenance, those types of items that I think have to be addressed. But it's just something to consider. And so thank you for all the work that you've done. And thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And let's see, next we have is Mayor Pro Tem Gandara.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Larry, for your presentation. I know we touched briefly about the municipal league and the importance of participating, right? The strength in numbers kind of thing. But did I miss you stating what the priorities were for the league?
Mayor and Council, no, you didn't. I don't think that they've been set yet. No, you did not miss that, and I'll provide those once we have them.
Okay, do you have an idea what that might look like?
Mayor and Council, really what they're focused on is kind of what Councilor Betas-Duve we just discussed is the participation in the Civil Rights Commission. That's what a lot of the focus has been on, just because that's what happened in the special session, and we know we're going to be dealing with it here in the 60-day session.
Sure. And I think that's really important. Around the civil rights discussion, I think some of that, and I've heard from at least a couple of folks in law enforcement and for some attorneys, is the whole camera issue and the way it was written, how it just sort of lumped everybody in, and the idea of having to have the camera turned on when you're interviewing victims of rape and or folks that are undercover, that all that could blow their cover. And I wondered if there had been any dialogue or discussion related specifically to that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. There was some discussion during the special session about those concerns, although they weren't to the level that we could get the language changed in the legislation, because there was an effort to address some of those issues and either try and put it off or to make some of those changes in the special session, and we were not able to make any headway with that. So I would not be surprised if some of that comes up as a fix during the 60-day to some of those, I want to call them more logistical issues, meaning there's not really an objection saying, hey, we should use ICE cameras, is that there are some ways we need to deal with how do you utilize them appropriately and effectively. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if we have some of those discussions this session. Okay. I don't know that we'll make any headway. I don't know if we'll do any better, but I would anticipate we'll make a run at it.
Sure. Yeah, Larry, being a social worker and working with victims of crime, specifically, rape, the system doesn't do a very good job of protecting. We re-victimize, folks, and I see that as a huge issue. And I'd like to have a little more dialogue about that. And I didn't know if having those conversations specifically when the elections, are settled, that we would have a conversation with the sponsor, which is Senator
Cervantes.
Yes, Cervantes. I don't know why I spaced that. Sorry, Senator Cervantes. So I'd like to have some of those conversations moving forward. The other thing is I didn't notice the mental health hospital component that we have done the last couple of years. I'd like to continue to see that. I know we're looking at having a more robust conversation with the county and MMC related to that. But I think having the governor, Larry, you involved in those conversations is going to be necessary, because we will need some funding, I think, moving forward. So
Councilor, on that point, if I may,
Yeah.
Mayor and Councilor, I've actually reached out, as you and I talked, I reached out to the governor's office, have a meeting set with the governor's health policy advisor to figure out what's the most appropriate, or what group that the administration think they could bring to have that conversation with us. It actually had been scheduled and then got rescheduled to later this week. So hopefully I will have something for you very soon on that ongoing conversation to have with the administration to discuss that issue.
Oh, excellent, Larry. Thank you so much for following up on that. I know it's a priority for me and others on council, and specifically for this region, really, that we address that accordingly. Let me see. Let me make sure that I have all my questions. Oh, Larry, do you know, and maybe this is more for staff, over the course of the 4 years that I've been now 5th year on council, we've had a number of resolutions brought forth and presented to our legislature. What work has been done to pull those and look at what we've done, what has passed, what hasn't, and those that haven't, or that we continue to be making headway, what are they, and will we have any of that in front of us to weigh in on?
Mayor and Council, I was kind of waiting to see if I don't know if staff has done that. I know from the past few years what they are and what they have been, and I think most of those ones that you've done over the last couple of years are on the list again. Cannabis, legalization of cannabis. The when you look, and I don't have it's on the previous slide, but if Amy, if you could go back to the previous. So the Coalition of Sustainable Community recommendations, a lot of those ones were on that we had legislation on last year, and you had some specifics related to that. I think the tobacco products may be a new one.
Yes.
That's new to this year. And the funding, I don't know if we had a resolution on the funding of the water management, but we did have, that's that pilot project I talked about. And so I had spoken with Dr. Garcia and others about the funding of that, and we worked on that. But the others are on here because most of the Coalition of Sustainable Communities, that legislation did not pass in the previous session. And then it's been a while since we've had a general legislative resolution like we talked about, and I had the conversation with Councilor Flores about. That's something that I just recommend, so you have an idea on kind of a broader policy platform of what you want us, what you want me, and what you would like staff to do. But I don't know that there have been many others. Oh, I'm sorry. The Social Security again. I don't say a redo. It's one that did not pass, and so that's continued from previous years.
Sure. Larry, I guess, there have been times when things have been brought to us, but we don't have like the previous bill or what might be the current status. And so I just want to make sure that with staff, and maybe it's David Dallahan or others that are keeping a list and just keeping us informed, and that we're keeping, track of this, and not, I just find often it's at, the last minute, and I don't have enough time to really research and review this. And so I just want to make sure that there's a process that we're keeping track and of all these items in the last, 4 or 5 years. And it's helpful because we have new council members, right? And so we just need to be mindful and thoughtful moving forward. I'm not saying that we're not, but just more mindful to that. So maybe Amy, do you have, I don't know who is the person that keeps track of all this staff-wise.
Mayor, Councilor Gondra, Amy Johnson-Basford, Grants Administrator. I believe that there was previously the policy analyst in the city manager's office who tracked those things. I'm not sure who in the city manager's office is working on those this year, but I will certainly, if Barbara or David are not available to answer, I will get with them following this meeting to make sure we have some kind of a process in place for you and get you that information.
Thank you, Amy.
And Councillor Gonda, I apologize. This is Barbara DeLeon. I'm a co-host of this meeting, so I can't raise my hand. So that's why you see my hand. But yes, I wanted to jump in to say that Amy is correct. The policy analyst and the policy analyst reports to the chief of staff. So that's currently Amber Vaughn, keeping track of the policy resolutions that have come before you over the previous years, so that we can make sure that they are included with the legislative priorities and that we're tracking any action that comes forward. I know I've mentioned previously that we are in the process of onboarding our new policy analyst, and that person's going to be doing a lot of required reading and review of the documentation for these policies. And I'm in coordination with Amber Vaughn to ensure that we will be putting together the consolidated resolution for policy items that Mr. Haran recommends prior to the legislative session, so that we can have one consolidated resolution for that.
I appreciate that. So will council know shortly, or what's the time frame on them starting?
I believe that we want to bring that resolution forward to you by the first meeting of December. That is when you will also be receiving the resolution regarding the capital priorities. So we would want to have them come forward at the same session.
Barbara, I appreciate the time frame in terms of the legislative priorities, the capital outlay, but what I meant was the policy analysts.
Oh, I apologize. Yes.
Okay.
So, yes, with respect to the policy analyst, that person will be onboarding in the month of November, hopefully in early November. We need to just schedule with HR the orientation. And then Amber Vaughn and I are working on the list of items for that person to help bring them up to speed. And certainly one of the first things that they're going to be doing is making outreach to you all to introduce themselves, make themselves available for questions and input, et cetera, and then working on this December resolution.
Perfect. Thank you, Barbara, for that. I appreciate it so much. And then finally, the capital outlay. I agree with Councilor Abeyta-Stuvey that we have our needs and wants, and any infrastructure, flooding, anything of that sort that requires, funding, we should really prioritize moving forward. And that's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mayor, Councillor Gondra, Amy Johnson-Bassford. I do have many slides left in this presentation regarding the Capitol, and so we'll tackle that unless there's any additional comments on policy. All of you councillors will have the opportunity to bring up other policy issues as we move forward. Larry Haran will be staying on the presentation with us, so as we get to the end of it, if you think of other policy issues you'd like to discuss, we will be able to discuss those as well.
Okay.
All right. If there are no further questions of Larry at this time, I want to kind of go through how we got to the process where we are today. And as many of you know, we've been refining this over the last couple of years. The grant department, myself, and one of my grant specialists, Aaron Sherratt, while I was on leave, met with each of you, as well as the city manager and the city lobbyist, and other members of the city manager's office for your priorities, what your big needs were, with the outlook of sticking to those things that were really geared towards public health, safety, and that type of thing. Then the grants office met, and the public works department met with each department regarding those priorities, as well as priorities that they had. The items were then compared to the approved state ICIP, and I'll talk about the ICIP here in a couple minutes. The estimated costs were added for each item, and the status of any current activities around that project were evaluated and added to our list. So the project selection comes down to a couple of really critical things. Last year, the Legislative Council Service, who is the keeper of all request for everything that goes before the legislature, made an effort to automate the capital outlay process. And what they did was they took the state ICIP that was approved last year, which is the one that we'll be dealing with for 2021, and put that in an automated format. So when I went in to set up the priorities that we had, what happened was I would put in the ICIP number that it's assigned by the state, and whatever we had put into the ICIP as that project was then put in as the portion of the project we were wanting to fund. This caused a lot of issues in that we have some ICIP items that we call buckets, where we are putting general facilities improvements, park improvements, those type of things that we can use as issues come up. Really was difficult then to bring it back down to the level that we wanted to specifically have funded. So that's why I say it has to be on the state ICIP, and we are working diligently to make sure that the wording and the project description on the ICIP is flexible for us to be able to discuss very specific areas that, as a council, you decide are the projects that need to be funded at this time. So we start with that requirement. Then we look at project readiness as a consideration on whether it should go on the priority list. We look at the amount of funding that's needed to complete the project and how much we already have. And we compare that somewhat to what Larry forecasts for us and says, you know, they're going to be able to fund large things. They're going to be able to fund small things. They're just going to look at water and health and roads and infrastructure. Whatever he kind of gives us a little bit of guidance on that he has in his crystal ball at this time, pending the election, let's say, we kind of pick that, we put that against the projects. And then we look at whether or not the project can be phased. And this is important for both myself and Larry when we are getting called during the session by legislators about our projects. If they don't have the whole amount, can they give us a portion that will get the project started? Can we do something of significance with the amount they're able to give us? So it's important that we can phase the project. Then we want to look at it in comparison with the city's strategic plan, as well as the many other plans that the city approves. But we primarily look at the city strategic plan that you all as a council developed for us. And then they must be a capital improvement. And that's really important. This money is for capital improvements. It's not for operating. It's not for small purchases, with the exception of possibly the public safety arena. We try and keep away from really small purchases that don't have a useful life of at least 10 years. So that's what we look at when we're trying to come up with the projects that we bring before you that could be priorities, excuse me. I've got about 9 projects on the list in discussions that I know many of you had with Larry. The goal is really to get to 3 to 5. And perhaps at the end, Larry can again discuss why that's a goal for us. But that's what I'm hoping to have you all come out with, giving us direction on which you'd like to see brought forward in that resolution that we'll be bringing in December. Okay, so to start our projects, as I said, I've got about 9 of them that I'm going to present to you that met the considerations, that meet the other criteria that we put forward. Of course, this one is always on our list and will be for the foreseeable future, the septic tank replacement projects from areas that the city has acquired that were on septic tanks previously. This is $3.8 million total. This is based on priority areas that was established by a study done in 2008 when we acquired the majority of these unincorporated areas that became a part of the city that were primarily on septic systems. And those two, and the amount that we could do to get that done. That overall project that was developed in 2008 is about a $20 million project. And I've got both Carl Clark and Delilah Walsh on from Utilities that can discuss how far we are along in getting that project completed. But the $3.8 million that we're bringing to you today would be utilized in District 2 for the remaining portions of Brittany Estates that need to be done, as well as to begin to work in the Estados Serenos area. And then also in District 6, the continuation of Hacienda Acres Phase 3. Then we have our street and flood control projects, which are always top of mind. Again, they're always a priority because roads and drainage are so critical to our citizens for their safety, their health, their welfare, their accessibility to services. The 1.25 million is for a project which includes land acquisitions, designs, right-of-ways, and construction. And the priorities that will be accomplished with this funding are dependent on a recent drainage study that was completed. So some of the things may be acquiring land for drainage programs or drainage projects in order to be able to, in the future, develop roads. There's quite a bit of recommendations in that drainage study, and I do have Public Works available to discuss that if there are questions. The other top priority in streets and flood control projects is the Madrid extension, extending Madrid Avenue from Martha to Trevice. This is becoming more and more important as we continue to have construction from NMDOT around our city, particularly as we move from the east side to the west or the west to the east. Other access roads are becoming much more traveled and need to be managed in anticipation of that. Under public safety, we have two items one for the police department, which is police mobile data terminals, $120,000. This replaces existing data terminals that have met their useful life. They are in the vehicles of police, all of the police vehicles, so that officers have connectivity for information out on the street while they're conducting stops, while they're working with our citizenry. And this would replace about 50 of the terminals. And this is a phased project that we replace 50 terminals every year as they meet their useful life. And then the second item under public safety is renovation for Fire Station 1 of $350,000. This is a remodel of the front office area to meet ADA requirements and security needs, particularly as more citizens come into the fire department to request assistance. And this is a critical need that they've identified for their department. And then also under public safety, this has been a project that we have discussed for many years now. It seems like it's always on the top of our list. And that's the communications equipment and infrastructure to make the city P25 compatible, which is a federal law that we need to become P25 compatible in order for both fire, police to work with other regional public safety response organizations when there are major issues that affect many areas and that are of a regional nature. And so to complete this project, we need a total of $844,000. This is to upgrade and replace police radios of approximately $360,000. The police department right now has an overall completion rate at about 85%. So they need a small amount of mobile radios, I believe, to bring them to full compatibility. Upgrade and replace fire radios. Again, they are approximately 86% in overall completion. They need about $120,000 to complete some additional mobile radios that are out of compliance. And then finally, our IT department needs infrastructure for the P25 communications. And this includes upgrades at A Mountain for repeaters that will actually make the whole thing be functional with other regional municipalities and public safety organizations. And that is $364,000. So altogether, that's a $844,000 project. Now we have a couple building projects that are of critical need as well. We have the Brannigan Cultural Center. This is a historic building, probably one of the major historic buildings on the city's inventory of buildings that is being used on a regular basis, and that is in extreme need of repair in order to save those items that are of historic significance on this building. Conclusion at the end of this of which ones are your primary priorities. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. And Mayor and Councilors, when we had the discussions with you, it kind of ended up morphing into what were kind of top priorities. And then I think, as Councilor Beta-Stuve said, kind of needs versus wants. And so in a time like this, the recommendation is the shorter the list, the better, just because if they're not going to have much funding available, if our list is too long and we go in with a long list, then it looks like we're kind of out of touch, for lack of a better word, with what's going on at the state level and what they're available for funding. So my recommendation is always to keep it as short as possible. So, I mean, there's no magic number. Last year we had a top 10, although they had a lot more funding available. That's why we kind of came with the 3 to 5, that if you can really narrow them down, we have a chance of being more successful if they do have some funding available. But when times are tough, it's just, you know, the more streamlined of a list we can give them, the better. And things that are on this list, septic replacement is always, I hate to say sold well. We've always been very successful with that ongoing project. And public safety communications is always a struggle, and it's always something that we can usually get support from, and maybe even from the administration. And then others are on there because when we're talking about roads and drainage, that's, again, legislators and council, typically that's something you all typically like to get fixed in your districts. And so we're just trying to keep it as small as possible, just so we can try and be as realistic as we can coming into this kind of lean session. So that's kind of the background for the discussions we've had. So I appreciate it and am available for any questions.
Thank you, Larry. So we've got Councilor Flores, Vasquez, and Beta-Stuve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you. Hold on a second. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Oh, here we go. So thank you so much, Ms. Johnson, Amy. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you again, Larry, for the information you present. I just want to say, Amy, you indicated that at the beginning when you said there were 9 projects and that they were whittled, you know, we should whittle it down to 4 or 5. On the septic tanks, you indicated that the project was developed in 2008. So there one comment and then a question. The comment, you said that right around the time that it was incorporated by the city. I believe you said that. And if you didn't say that, forgive me, but for not hearing correctly. But the city was East Mesa, the one that we're talking about here, the East Mesa south of 70, was actually incorporated in 1986. So I don't know what the city did between 1986 and 2008. But I just want to say that somehow someone fell asleep at the wheel, and the septic tanks replacement, you know, I mean, I'm glad that we have it, and I'm glad that we'll hopefully be able to implement it, because it's just not the septic tank replacement issue, but it's a connection issue, and hopefully we can get some funds or grants or something where property owners can actually have get rid of the septic tanks, because when they replace the septic tank, they also have to take care of the cleanup, and that must be, you know, a pretty penny there too. So I hope, you know, I hope that we take care of that in the East Mesa. And I just wanted to say that the people I've spoken with out in that part of town have expressed, not, you know, some of them really don't want and I'm talking about the equestrian area out there. there, that's like east of Dunn, and there's a pocket there that is part of the city. Yeah, they like their roads the way they are, and they also maintain them. They maintain them beautifully. And it's like, you know, the beautiful desert and, you know, horses and all that beautiful stuff. But west of that, you know, some of the roads are less than, I think that it's surprising to see. And I know that some people think that that's how people want it, but I've spoken to constituents there who have expressed the need for roads because when it rains, it's just a deep puddle. And most of them, I guess, do carry boots in their cars and trucks when it rains. But so anyway, I just want to say that part of the city was incorporated in 1986. So we're going close to 35 years, and 2008, the project was developed. So my question to you, Amy, or to who the powers that be in the city, perhaps David Dollahan would be the one with the institutional memory on this. So the project was developed in 2008, and what happened? Did it just sit there?
Mayor Councilor Flores, if I may. Amy
Yes.
Johnson Ashford. So Councilor Flores, I apologize if I misspoke. The project was the process of incorporating those areas onto the city sewer system. Not that that's when it was incorporated by the city, but I utilized that word incorporating as bringing it into the city's sewer system. So that's what was developed in 2008. And for many years now, we have been receiving small amounts of funding every year, sometimes a little over $1 million, sometimes $500,000 to move this project forward. And the Utilities Department has a list of the areas that they will go through, and they've prioritized those based on recommendations from the community, and as they develop areas on which ones they will tackle next, for lack of a better word. So I do have Carl Clark on the call, as well as Delilah Walsh from Utilities, that they may be able to discuss more of what's happened since 2008 to now. But as I said, we've received small amounts of funding every year for this project, and it is a large $20 million project, so it will take us many years to get this fully completed. If Carl or Delilah wants to add anything to that, I'd appreciate that.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, Madam Councilor. This is Delilah Walsh, the Utilities Director. And I can't speak to what happened back in 2008, obviously, but I can tell you that we have completed for the Hacienda Acres, Homestead Acres. The first phase was completing the designs for those sewer changeouts and doing the system hookup and all the engineering plans. That, I believe, we've completed. And so in that sense, that was the first step. And what we did is we did not use any of the legislative funding for the design portion. We did that through utilities funding. And then we'll be coming in using the legislative money to do those changeouts. So really it comes down just to a matter of funding and expanding the system and planning for that every year. The legislative outlay, the capital outlay, has been the best solution simply because it's supporting that sewer change out and not having the full expense of a sewer hookup. So for example, if I had to bring in a full sewer hookup to your neighborhood, it could be anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 to run those lines. By having the capital outlay, it subsidizes that expense for the consumer and the end user. And so what it does is it helps us make it affordable. And really that's the bottom line. The utility can't just donate the expense of doing so. We have to have some sort of offsetting funding, and the capital outlay has been able to do that. Obviously the residents can't afford or don't choose not to. I know I wouldn't if I had a septic tank to expand those sewer systems and replace their septic unless you absolutely have to because of the expense. And so the capital outlay is the best way for us to do that and subsidize that cost for the consumer.
Ms. Welsh, why would the homeowner or the resident have to bear the expense of the sewer. Oh, you just mentioned something that, I'm sorry, I got distracted. Why would the resident be incurring any cost in this regard, in what you just said?
Mr. Mayor, Madam Councilor, it's like every part of the utility system. Just as a developer would have to pay for utility lines to be laid into a subdivision, a single homeowner has to pay the infrastructure cost of bringing those lines to your home. And so if I don't have city water right now and I don't have city sewer or city gas, if those lines aren't already available as a stub out, I have to pay for that infrastructure. In a subdivision, a developer typically does that. They pay for us to come in and install the lines. The utility does not install service lines to your home. That's something that developers typically do. So if you live in a home where there's no sewer or water and you want to get into the city system, you do have to pay for that connection. That is a burden of the end user and not of the utility as a whole.
And if I may, Councillor and Delilah, so the further reason, Councillor Flores, is we're not allowed to pay for that hookup because it's a violation of the anti-donation clause.
Yeah.
But I will tell you,
I understand.
that the value, and we very rarely have residents that have a problem with the paying of the hookup because the money they'll save not only in septic tanks, cleaning and fees and having to replace it, but the value of their home, the increase because now they're on city utilities is far outweighs that connection price.
Okay, well then hopefully we can have a good campaign going to educate them, because that there is a reticence out there about that. So it's kind of like, well, we're going to have a quote septic capability, or excuse me, removal capabilities, but then there's a huge price to pay for that. But
Councillor, do you mind? It looks like Larry Horan wants to say something maybe on this issue.
oh,
You want him?
I don't really
Larry,
know.
did you have something you wanted to say?
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor. In my recollection, when this started in 2008, what started it was there was a change in the regulation. I believe it's the Environment Department. I may be wrong. It may be or Office of State Engineer. There was a change in the size of your lot. So if you had a lot that was less than half an acre, you were not able to replace your septic system. And so that's what started this. That's what created the requirement. So it wasn't something the city did. It was actually a change at the state level. And so if you're on one of those smaller lots, you needed to redo your leach field, you wouldn't be able to get a permit. And so you have a whole bunch of people who are going to be forced to move into the sewer system, which is why we started this effort back in 2008 and have been doing it every year. So it wasn't really anything that the city had done.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Horan. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could add to that, Mr. Horan's correct. It was changed to a 3/4 acre where a lot of lots were subdivided to 1/2 acre to start out with. And then NMED did increase the requirement to 3/4 acre.
Yeah. In fact, I think when I was a commissioner back in 1990, it was 1/4 of an acre. Then it went to 1/2 acre and then 3/4. But we also did it to protect our water source as well. Okay, Councillor Vasquez. Oh, are you done, Councillor Flores?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Ms. Mayor and Ms. Walsh and Mr. Horan. Thank you.
Councillor Vasquez.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to just ask here about the Madrid Road extension. I guess I'm trying to look at the impact these projects would have to the largest amount of people in terms of quality of life. And, I think I fully support really all of these. But thinking about Madrid Road extension, what phase of the Madrid Road extension would this fund essentially? And with 400,000 maybe being on the lower end of these requests, is this something potentially that we can find within the budget to do soon, or is this something pressing as part of our overall plan to unclog the congestion right there on Madrid Avenue and eventually, I think, get an underpass maybe under the freeway there?
Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, I will defer to Tony Trevino from the Public Works Department about this project.
Hello, Mayor, Councilor Vasquez. This is Tony Trevino again with Public Works, Interim Deputy Director. So Madrid right now, as we're digging into the design, and we've had discussions with NMDOT. the plan and the future kind of outlook for an underpass there is kind of what is our biggest, I guess you can say, concern right now. So with that being said, looking at impacts on the east side of Highway 70, of I-25, we're going to have to realign Madrid a little bit. So we are planning ahead for that future underpass. Other items that we're looking at is a traffic signal at Madrid and Treviso, and the landscaping and any kind of tie-ins and connections into that development of the Via Mora Dam. So with this funding here, and I believe we have about $300,000 of city funding into the project, we're still a little short with the plans, but at least this gives us a big step for the construction. So I believe with this $400,000 will put us at $700,000 total on the project, which is about an estimate of about 1.3 million for the entire project, which includes traffic signals. So with that, we're anticipating that the traffic signals there, but as we get into further design, we're going to actually do the study to see if it's required. But we are taking worst case scenario that those would be required. So.
Okay, thank you, Tony. So this 400,000 here then is for infrastructure, not necessarily for planning. Is that right?
Mayor, Councilor, if I may, it looks like David wants to jump in. Cedillo, do you mind if he responds? Maybe he had something he wanted to add to what Tony said.
Oh, sure.
David.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to let Tony finish his comment with Mr. Vasquez, and then I'll add to the discussion. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Yeah, so Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, I believe your question was if this money was for construction or design. We are doing the entire design in-house with engineering and architecture staff. The only outsource we'll probably do is the traffic signal study at that intersection. So it is all being done in-house with staff. So all this money will be used toward construction.
All right, great. Thank you. Yeah, well, that's very helpful. David, before I comment or ask questions further, if you would like to comment.
Yes, thank you. Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, David Cedillo, Interim Public Works Director. I'd also like to add that this portion that we included for Madrid would also finish other improvements that we will be doing in the area. So this is a portion from Anita over to Treviso that'll help us finish a corridor improvement along Madrid that is incorporated with other projects in the CIP. So we felt that this small portion of roadway would also benefit not only the connection, but give that complete street design all the way through Madrid and basically finish a corridor without leaving certain portions unfinished. So it not only does improve the items that Mr. Trevino announced, but it also completes an area along with Elevate Las Cruces and the active transportation plan to complete a portion here. That way we're not left with segments to come back and improve at later times. That's why it was also included as there. It is a small cost, but that was the other factor that we looked at in including this in the priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Tony. Well, yeah, this is the one I'll advocate for. It's in my district, but also I think in terms of public benefit, currently that section of Madrid that connects to Treviso, which was a valuable connection for us to open up many years ago, also will provide, I think, that the sidewalks that we really need, I think, along Madrid. I see often a lot of folks walking along the side of Madrid. There's currently no sidewalks there, and can get kind of dangerous, especially because people are using the Via Mora Dam area as a park already. And so I see often people walking their dogs and going for jogs or whatever it is to connect to the Treviso path on there. And so I think having that street finished would have a good public safety benefit, but would also help set a border, a buffer area, I guess, between the actual Via Mora Dam area and Madrid, and then, eventually get us ready to add another east to west connection from the, in the city that I think is just really badly needed as well, to accommodate for existing and future growth. And so, but other than that, all these other projects are just really important as well. And so, I don't know if we're trying to narrow it down to 5 or what the magic number is. So I'll advocate for that one. But certainly if there are other really important projects, I'm also happy to narrow it down as we need to, even if this is not included. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I had to step away, so I'll be taking over the meeting. Thank you, Councilor Vasquez. I'm sorry, in terms of the lineup, I didn't know, is it Gil or Councilor Sorg or Councilor Bencomo?
It's me.
Okay. Bencomo.
Yes,
Thank you.
Bencomo. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And yes, thanks for the presentation, everyone, and for all my colleagues' questions. Sort of for my own understanding, given this is really my first go around at this, when you say narrow it down to 5, in terms of, are we more concerned about the price tag on the end of the list, or just in terms of we shouldn't go, or just in terms of like we should just pick 5 so that it's easier pill to swallow, or is it both?
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Bencomo, Amy Johnson-Basford, Grants Administrator. It is a little bit of both, I will say. I may have Larry kind of come in. Since we don't have a really good idea of what income they may have available to them this year, we've done a mix of high and low cost ones. So really your guiding principle today should be, these are the most important things for the city to get done infrastructure wise. And these are the things that we feel very strongly are critical to moving the city forward, as you all believe should be done. And that's kind of what should be the guiding principle. We will keep all of these in reserve. So if they have a bunch of extra money, we can throw those out there to them. But as Larry mentioned, we don't anticipate that's going to be happening. And we want to keep it a small enough list that they don't feel the need to if there is some money available, they've got things to fund. But we also want to be very cautious if they don't have any money available, that we aren't asking for so much that they want to consider not funding anything.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
We want to give them something that's manageable.
Got it. Thanks,
Okay,
Amy. That's
thank
super
you.
helpful.
Okay.
And then, Amy, can you go back to the Brannigan Cultural Center pieces? I feel like what I heard you say was mostly sort of superficial.
Oh, it's okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Bencomo, somebody is unmuted. I'm sorry, can you ask your question again, Councilor Bencomo?
In terms of the Brannigan Cultural Center, I feel like what I mostly heard from you was more like superficial type projects. Is that right?
Sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Bencomo, I'm challenged with my mute button here. These are very fundamental parts of the building that are beginning to deteriorate and are causing the building to deteriorate further. They are considered the historical elements of the building, but they are very integral to the infrastructure of the building. The exterior stucco is in several areas completely coming away from the building, leaving the underside exposed to the elements and causing damage. The original windows, some of those are stained glass windows, and they are like kind of held in by hook and crook over there, so they don't fall out. Several of the interior and exterior wood elements are beginning to seriously deteriorate, which then causes further deterioration of the windows or the doorways. I do have Rebecca Slaughter and Lynn Gallagher from the Quality of Life on the line, and if they would like to speak further about how these issues are impacting the building, I would appreciate that.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Gondura and Councilor Bencomo. Rebecca Slaughter, Deputy Director for Quality of Life for the record. And Amy is correct. The problem is the longer the building goes without being fixed, the worse the damage is going to get. If you go over into the courtyard of the cultural center, the wood vigas over the windows are just rotting away, and the more we get moisture, just like what's going to maybe happen tomorrow, that gets behind the stucco, and water damage gets into under the paint and under the stucco, and it does more and more damage. As you look, if you walk, especially behind the building, between the Stull building and the Brannigan Cultural Center, you can see a lot of damage to the stucco. Unfortunately, in probably the 80s, the building had elastomeric paint put on top of it, which is the worst thing you can do for the kind of stucco that is over the building. And so that is coming apart. And the stucco, as Amy alluded to earlier, is a lot more sand than you would expect. And also, I'm assuming many people look at that building and assume that it's an adobe structure building, and it is not. It is actually a clay tile building. So you have a lot of different elements working against each other, and the more moisture you get into the building, the worse and worse it gets. So the longer time we go, the more damage there's going to be. And then one of the interesting things about that building is the carving that's in the stucco. It's called banana. Striking into that, the person who did that, there's only a few buildings in Las Cruces that have that particular type of stucco decoration. And of course, the person who did that is no longer with us, but his grandson is still in town. And so one of the things that we would love to do as we repair the building is have his grandson not only teach us how to do it, but also hold community meetings and community education programs so that we can learn about this very Las Cruces, Doña Ana County type of stucco process, so that we don't lose that heritage that we have from our region.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Slaughter. I appreciate that context. And then Amy, could you go back to the full list again, please? Or I'm sorry, whoever's controlling the PowerPoint.
That is me.
Okay. What happens to, like, for example, I'm going to call them like the lower ticket items. If, you know, we move forward today. So personally, I'm inclined to, you know, support some of the bigger ticket items like that, to me, feel incredibly necessary, particularly in a moment of financial crisis for the state. Like, what feels especially necessary? Septic, roads, to me, is always like top of the list. Obviously, the airport expansion, I feel like we are in a critical moment in the conversation towards, you know, living into that aspiration of what the airport could look like. Obviously, I'm going to advocate for that as well. But so what happens with like some of these other like 120,000, like if they're not funded this year, but are, you know, more critical as well, what's the plan?
Great question, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Bencomo. So the items that are not selected as priorities for you, we do still we keep those on the ICIP. If there is additional funding, or if for some reason a legislator has a little bit of funding left over and they really want to do something for fire, or they really want to do something for youth, we can bring these forward to them and say, you know, these were also priorities that you could, you know, and then we'll work with the department on figuring out what dollar amount matches what they have available, what could be done. So they don't go away completely, but they are not in the resolution of the top 5 that we present to the legislators. There is a lot of back and forth during session, and so some of these may rise back up to the level of being actually funded, even if it's not one of your selected items. But then what happens is that as Public Works moves through the current CIP process, these things remain on the CIP list and are integrated into that for the ICIP for next year. So they don't go away. They just keep moving along on the ICIP and the CIP program.
Okay. That's great to hear, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
And then my last question, can you talk more about P25? I feel like I'm not entirely sure what that means still.
Okay, so I'll have to call on either Chief Enriquez or Interim Chief Dominguez to give me the exact date, but several years ago, I want to say 5 or more years ago, the federal government passed a law that all public safety agencies needed to have an interconnectability so that they could communicate together in large scale emergencies. So an emergency like that for our area could be a wildfire, could be what happened in El Paso last year, could be some of the other major things that might close down the highways or the freeways, and they need to be able to talk to each other. And so that is a law that was passed by the federal government because every department was buying their own stuff, and sometimes they'd buy it new, that some department that had a lot of funding would buy really new stuff, and other departments that didn't have a lot of funding, well, they just kept what they'd had 20 years ago, and so they couldn't talk to anybody. Our departments do have some challenges with the Sheriff's Department as well as Border Patrol and the State Police Department in interconnectability, and I can have one of those two gentlemen I mentioned speak to that. But it's been a goal for the city for the last several years to get ourselves 100% compliant with P25. And P25 is a technical lingo for being able to, regardless of the type of communication system you have, that you can communicate with other people regardless of the type of communication system they have. So if Chief Enriquez or Interim Chief Dominguez would like to add to that, that would be great. I think they're both on the line.
Mayor Pro Tem Gandara and Councilor Bencomo. Amy's correct. It's a mandate. P25. It's a digital format. So what we're trying to do is get all radios on the 800 megahertz system. The P25 speaks to digital. Right now, all of our radios are in analog mode. As soon as we get compliant and have all the infrastructure, we can all go to digital. In our case, as far as the police department's concerned, we're asking, we saved some money years back when we purchased some of our vehicles by putting in analog radios, but to bring them up to compliance, we have to replace those with digital. The other radios that we do have are the newer radios that we do have are digital and analog both. So what we're trying to do is get them all digital.
Thank you, Chief. What's the consequence, maybe, the longer we're not on this system?
So there's no, I mean, it's a mandate for interoperability, just like Amy had advised. There's a set date that we have to all comply with. The date has not been a drop dead date. They know that there's some funding issues with everybody, but it speaks to interoperability. So they haven't come up with anything saying that you're gonna be penalized for not being part of it, but it is a mandate.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. And that was all my questions, Amy. I appreciate your very thorough responses. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, I'm back. So thank you, Councilor Bencomo. We've got Councilor Sorg, Abeta Stuvi, and Gandara next.
Thank you, Mayor.
Wait a minute, Councilor Scott Marr just jumped on. Scott, do you have something you want to say? Oh, I guess he did. Okay.
No, Mr. Mayor, this is Scott Marr, IT Director. I did have something I wanted to just add to the comments on the P25 radio question for Councilor Bencomo. The other aspect of it is our current system is no longer in production, and replacement parts are getting very difficult to obtain. So we're having to go to secondary markets when we have to replace parts. We can no longer buy them directly from the manufacturer. So that's the other aspect of this, is the longer we push this out, the more our current infrastructure is aging and becoming less supportable.
Thanks for that.
Thank you, Mr. Marr.
Okay, sorry about that, Councilor Sorg.
That's okay. That's good information to know.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to add some more information about the East Mesa roads and drainage. As Amy said, these are the roads that are in the same condition they were back in 1986 when the areas were annexed into the city and told that their roads would be brought up to city standards. They haven't. These are mostly dirt roads. I'd say not more than 10 of various lengths. And I would say there's 4 to 5 roads that are pretty serious problems. The main thing is that this is a part of our city that has some of the poorest people in the city. And this would really help with their equity in the city's population. So I think this is a time we need to keep going on these streets. There's been a few that have been brought up to city standards, but there's some stubborn ones that are a problem, and we need to have some funding in order to finish it out. So I just wanted to add that into the conversation today about our project list. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see here, Councilor Betastubi.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Amy, as well. I did have, a lot of my questions have actually already been answered. If I'm going to do like a top 2 right now, obviously septic system replacement would be very important. And I think the public safety communications upgrades are also in my top sector. I did want to ask about the police mobile data terminals. With that in mind, is this just kind of a scheduled replacement that we're trying to do to get everybody up with these new systems? Or are we having like significant failures right this moment with these terminals?
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor Betastubi. As I understand from police, and Interim Chief Dominguez is on the phone and can correct me if I say anything wrong. These are like any other computer system. They get to a point where they are out of date and they've met their useful life. And so the police department has developed a schedule of replacement of these on a regular basis. And so this is a project that comes up pretty much every year, that there are certain ones that are just technologically out of date. They don't meet the current standards of what we're using the terminals for, and they need to be replaced. And that's kind of why we bring it a little bit at a time, because each year some of them fall out of the time frame that they should be used in. And I will defer to Interim Chief Dominguez if he has any other comments on this.
Mayor, Councilor Betastubi, Amy's is correct on that. It's old technology that we're replacing, as well as the new academy that graduates on a yearly basis. It's to replace and to add those computers in.
Okay, thank you. And if there is one that has a failure mid-year, do we have other options for funding to make sure that that can be replaced, or do you wait kind of the once a year to see what can happen?
Mayor, Councilor Betastubi, that's correct. We use general funds if we have an emergency or somebody's breaks or gets water damage or something like that. We do replace them on a yearly basis, ones and twos, but a big chunk like this, we always ask for money to see if we can get funding. Okay,
thank you. Just with going with these, obviously that needs to be done. And I'm trying to think if that's, do we go for the big ticket items, the smaller ones? But if there's, with some of the smaller items, if there are other creative ways that we can try to see how to fund it, if, that would be a need, not just a want, but a need, how we could make sure to get that taken care of, perhaps in a different way if it can't be funded during this list. And like I said, I know the septic system is really important. Changing that out is very cost prohibitive for a lot of the residents on their own. And so it's very useful. With the youth services building improvements, I did have one question. I know when I had my chats, we talked about the Papin Center and actually about the dining area improvements that needed to be done. but I wasn't sure what the basement repair was going to be inclusive of.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor Beta-Stubbe. So yes, we looked at what your list was, and that did discuss the dining area at the Pavement Center for senior programs. Senior programs is on a separate state ICIP list. And the way that we get funded for those items is we have to submit an actual grant application about a year and a half in advance for them to vet out what projects are necessary. They do have a small amount of funding that they have available throughout the years in between the general elections, because all funding for senior programs or senior capital improvements comes through the election question, the bond question that's on all of our election ballots this year for seniors, libraries, and education. So the funding for those kind of things comes out of that general election bond. They do maintain a small amount of money for if there is a critical need that is endangering the safety or health of the participants, that we could get some of that funding, those projects paid for that way. But what we were doing with the ones that were brought forward this session is that those will be applied for this spring because we missed the previous application deadline was in the spring, usually April. And we will put, if those haven't been put on the application list, we will put those in application this coming spring for funding by the New Mexico Aging and Long-Term Services Division. So what we did with the youth services is these were from parks. This was actually one of the parks priorities, is to maintain these buildings. The basement at the Pavement Center, I understand, I have never been in the basement there, so I am going off the word of some folks who actually have been in the basement, is that there is an issue with flooding. Drainage from the outside when it rains comes into the basement. We do have a sump pump to remove it from the basement, but what is the best solution to it, in light of the fact it's also a historic building, is to fill the basement in so that it completely eliminates the opportunity for water to get into the basement, cause mold and other issues that may affect the folks that use it all the time, which is primarily the youth services in that area of the building. I do have Sonia Delgado on the line, as well as David Cedillo, that might speak to the building's current situation that may give you some more information, if one of you all can join in.
Good afternoon, Sonia Delgado, Director of Parks and Recreation, Mayor and Councilor Stubbe. The Pavement Center currently houses two parts of our section, which is the youth services. We have our teen program there, and then we also have our recreation programming unit that is also housed in the same facility. And as Amy discussed, we do have some flooding issues that happen in the basement. Every time it rains, we get moisture down there. We do have a sump pump in there right now to help us get the water out, but that is not very sufficient at the moment, nor efficient, because we can get some of that water out, but we still have some moisture in there. And this has been going on for a couple of years now. And so we're expecting to have some moisture in there after the next couple of days. So we do have quite a few individuals that go through that. And of course, we also share that building with senior programs.
Thank you. And, you know, that whole area actually of town has a lot of drainage issues. And so I don't see that problem correcting itself anytime soon. So important. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Let's see. Next, Mayor Pro Tem Gondara.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you. Always a tough situation having to prioritize, but I just want to say very quickly, the septic system replacement is important to me, the East Mesa roads and drainage, of course, the Madrid road extension. But I had some questions, Amy, about that. And I didn't hear it specifically, but I think it's important to, especially as we are rehabbing all the renovations, right, that the park is undergoing. the possibility of development at the Three Crosses area near the hospital. It's really important to update the Madrid Road. And so would that entail the complete streets, everything that Elevate has is looking at creating that buffer, as Councilor Vasquez indicated, just updating specifically and to include the traffic. I think the light, the Hawk system has been, I know a conversation that I've had in the past with David Dollahan and with David Maestas, but I don't want to lose sight of that. There's some accidents that occur over there. I'm really concerned with the property across the street. Ward and Sons, he sees a lot of speeding, and people across the street from Mira Vista, you know, are lots of them walk or bike. And then we have a senior population as well, disabled population. So I just want to make sure that we're considering the Hawk system when we're looking at that traffic light and all the other additions that I think is going to be important to slowing down traffic.
Question, Councilor. Mayor, Councilor Gondra, Amy Johnson Basford, for the record. This particular extension is specifically from Martha East to Travis. So from kind of the end of the of Madrid through the Villa Moria Dam area to Travis, to include looking at the need for a light at the Travis and Madrid intersection there. Some of the areas that you mentioned have other projects happening in them, and if Tony Trevino or David Cedillo are still on the phone, I can defer to those questions to them.
Yes, thank you, Amy. Mayor Pro Tem Gondara, this is Tony Trevino with Public Works. Amy is right. This project that we are talking about for legislative appropriations is from Martha to the east. However, we currently have an NMDOT grant and federal grant, a TAP grant going on. That's going to continue some of the active transportation plan bike routes that we have done from Walnut and Hadley to Spruce. That will connect Spruce through Kilmore, Evelyn, and then through Madrid, and Madrid all the way to Solano. These would be a combination of buffered bike lanes, bike boulevards, and shared bike lanes. Shared bike lanes. This is going to complete this. It'll continue the first MAP grant that we had on Walnut from Loman, Griggs to Hadley, and then continue north to Spruce and continue this whole leg of that active transportation plan. For that area that you were that you had mentioned for the Hawks signal, what we are going to be doing is we followed what the Alpaka blueprint had for a cross section, buffered bike lanes and so forth. So we are going to do a pavement replacement in that area, mill and overlay, and then do some striping at that interim. But we will definitely look into the future for any kind of crossing mechanisms in that area.
Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate it. I just know that entire street is affected from traffic. But also, so Amy and Tony, the area that you're talking about, Councilor Vasquez and I had a joint meeting with many constituents related to that area. Is that the same thing where we're looking at sort of a path, lighting, those kinds of things to mitigate the traffic and the what's happening there currently? It's pretty dangerous. We really had a lot of folks reach out to us specific to that four-way stop being taken out. Is that part of that discussion? Am I right when you talk about this Madrid extension?
Yes, what we're looking at is this is going to include that four-way stop that was created there. We'll discuss with traffic what are some of the possibilities we can do there if needed, as well as the traffic signal study at the intersection of Travis and Madrid. But from that segment between Martha and Travis, we are going to look at, so there's no sidewalks there. Right now, that is just a mill and overlay, just a recycled asphalt road with some oil on top. So we're going to plan on doing sidewalks, street lighting, landscaping. So we're going to design a full, complete street cross section in that area, and that's where the budget is at right now, and that's what we're shooting for.
I appreciate that. I think that's an important one that should be in on our priority list. The other is for me for the P25 the communication between the law enforcement and the security, public safety, I guess. What have we done to speak to the federal delegation related to funding of some sort from either public safety or other departments? And maybe it's time to not only, if this goes through, to send a resolution specific to our federal delegation related to funding, that we really, basically you pass this law and it feels like it's an unfunded mandate, correct?
Mayor, Councilor Gondra, sorry, my speaking is failing as we go on. You're right. It was an unfunded mandate from the federal government. I believe initially there was probably a limited amount of funds for some of the larger agencies to convert to this. Perhaps Interim Chief Dominguez might speak to it a little more. I don't know that we have ever made an outreach to our federal legislators about this, but that certainly is a great idea, that if they can help us identify a grant program at the federal level that we could apply for this, or if they know of anticipated funding that they can bring forward as a policy directive in the next session that they are working in, or the next budget session that they start working on. Interim Chief Dominguez, if you have other comments, or if you have a history, any kind of knowledge of our history of reaching out to the federal legislators.
Mayor Pro Tem Gondara, I don't have any history of looking into any type of grant funding or anything, but we definitely will reach out and see if we can find some grant funding to cover that cost.
Thank you. Thank you. Lastly, around Mayor, I think Jason Smith has his hand up, probably has some history.
Okay, DC Smith.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Gondara, Deputy Chief Jason Smith. I'm here with Chief Enriquez. And we have on the fire side applied for several grants over the years. FEMA through the AFG, the Assistance to Firefighters Grant, gives us funding opportunities. And most recently, just in the last year and a half, 2 years, we received legislative funding from one of our legislators here in New Mexico, close to $700,000 for upgrading our handheld radios to P25 Phase 2 compliant.
Thank you, DC Smith. I appreciate that. I think that moving forward, we should really prioritize this. I hear this year after year, and maybe we can get our funding, our partners in El Paso Insight to help us really craft a great grant, so that we can get some additional funding, so that we are making a dent on this moving forward. I think it's critical that our law enforcement and fire have the ability to communicate with each other, the different partners moving forward. Amy, can you go back to the original list? I just want to make sure that can I ask from the public safety from LCPD, or maybe this goes to budget, from year to year, is there still funding left in your budget that is turned back to the general fund? And if so, could we identify that funding to address the issue of the purchasing of the police mobile data terminals?
Mayor, Councilor Gondra, I will defer that question to either Leanne Demouche, our Chief Budget Officer, or Interim Chief Dominguez.
Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, we typically do give back some money. Last year, for example, we gave back in the neighborhood of $70,000, but that was operating. And the only reason we gave that back was because the items that we had ordered could not be received within a certain time before January 30th, to be specific. Other monies that are turned back are typically cost savings due to salary savings.
So Chief, couldn't there be a budget adjustment and earlier on before the end of fiscal year to purchase the data terminals moving forward? When you anticipate those budget or the cost savings related to vacancies or whatever other issues that come up?
Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, I would have to reach out to city management and city manager and see if we can ask for those funds, the salary savings. As far as the other funds, our operating funds, pretty much already encumbered. It's just we're keeping our fingers crossed that we get the items that we actually ordered to get those funds spent.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor, I think Leanne has her hand up.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Leanne Demouche.
Yes, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem Gondara, our interim police chief, Miguel Dominguez, is correct. He did leave some operating budget, very little on the table. He is correct. They do leave quite a bit of funding in the personnel. However, I want to remind council that when we adopted our the budget that we're currently in right now, one of the line items that we put in there is what we call open position savings. And some of that open position savings that's in our budget comes from, the police department, and also because of fire, they have people that retire, then they have some turnover. But I will tell you that very, very soon, usually about mid-year, we start running projections on what we think the open salary savings will be and start working with every single department, especially since we're in the middle of the process, to see what is going to be filled, what vacancies will be filled, and how soon they'll be filled, so we can make a great projection. So anything that is over that open position savings, of course, we can through our new city manager, Mr. Peely, or it's city management, we can budget those as well.
Thank you, Leanne. I appreciate that. I know I said lastly, I think, but I wanted to ask on the Brannigan Cultural Center improvements. How many people, I know right now it's different with COVID, but if we have some structural damage and it may be unsafe, I don't know that that's correct, but if that's the case, I guess I'm looking at, how many folks of our community frequent that at any given time, and maybe some of the more popular exhibits. And if it might be a safety issue. So I'm thinking we need to manage that. Could I get sort of an idea of what the numbers of people that frequent that, and if in fact it's a safety issue?
Mayor, Councilor Gondra, Amy Johnson Basford, I will defer that off to Rebecca Slaughter, who I'm sure has those numbers. That she can speak to when we are not in COVID closure, how many people come through that building and how many people work in that building.
Right. Thank you, Amy.
Mayor Pro Tem, this is Rebecca Slaughter, Deputy Director of Quality of Life. So we get about 100,000 visitors to all 4 museums per year. We're not quite there yet, and we were hoping to break that number before COVID hit. So I would probably say about 30 to 40,000 of those go to the Brannigan every year. right now it's not a structural issue. There is some structural damage to the inside of the building, and we have current plans with the current legislative money to fix that in February. But we had a structural engineer come in and work with Public Works to assess that it's not a critical structural issue, so it was safe for the staff and for the public to go in. But the problem is, yes, as more and more time goes by, it will get to the point where it could become critical. But when we do these big kinds of projects like we're going to do in February, we're actually going to close from February to June and move the staff and all of the public and anything that might be damaged out of the building, because we're going to actually redo all the electrical, which is still from 1935, a lot of it, and redo the ceiling and the security all at the same time. Public Works has been really great about working with us to schedule this all, so it does the minimum amount of displacement to the public and to the staff. So we really, really try to schedule these things for that kind of thing. But yes, the more time goes on and the more water gets in behind that stucco, it could start to damage the actual structure of the building. Luckily, the Public Works was able to work and get get the roof leaks fixed, and that was what's causing the actual structural damage that we have now. So you are correct. Right now we're okay, but it is something that we are keeping an eye on, and we have through Public Works had structural engineers come in and look and fix those things that are immediate issues, where walls have started to separate and those kind of things.
Right. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I know that that's the utmost concern of staff, and you're doing everything that you can. And the minute you feel that there's something, not right, could be unsafe, you're notifying us, the public, staff, that kind of thing. So I think it's important that this be a part of that, that priority list for sure, because we'll have, a bad situation turn worse. And I know that all of it, we don't want to see that. The other thing is, since we're talking about historic buildings and whatnot, I just want to make sure that the WIA building gets a part of this as well. They're showing outside, but also in critical issues related to the infrastructure. I know that we've had a detailed conversations. We had someone come out with Robert Cruz and Heather Pollard and such to look, that has a significant amount of expertise related to the historic properties. And so I don't want to lose sight of that. Just want to make sure that that's a part of the conversation moving forward. And lastly, I agree with Councilor Bencomo. We're such at a pivotal, critical time with the airport terminal, and I want to see that as part of this priority list. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Gondra, I will have Public Works provide you with an update outside of this meeting where the WAI building is and what the plans are for it in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Anything else?
Mayor, councilors, if no other comments from a very brief, fast writing that I've done here, it looks like the top priorities are the septic system replacement, the East Mesa roads and drainage, the Madrid road extension, the communication upgrades, and the airport terminal are top on the list, and then followed by the Brannigan Cultural Center. What we can do from here is put together the resolution that we will bring forward on December 7th for you to discuss. Of course, at that time, council may remove items or change that resolution. If there are other comments that you have regarding this list, if you can share them with our city manager so that he can inform us how we should move forward with the resolution. I will take that kind of as the directive for us to go forward. unless there are any other comments on that. And then we will begin to prepare the legislative requests in time for Larry to have them for our legislators, newly elected legislators after November 3rd. Hopefully we can get that to them shortly after that December 7th meeting. If there are no other comments, that is all that we have for you today.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate that very much. And I believe, Barbara, we're going to postpone 3.3?
Correct. Mayor, we're going to, if you would like to remove that from the agenda today, we could accommodate that presentation at the second November work session.
Okay, I think that'd be fine. Yeah, go ahead and do that. And then we have the agenda setting meeting and then, okay, if there's nothing further, then entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor?
Yes?
We still have one other.
We do?
Yes, we do.
Oh, my goodness. We have 3.2. Okay.
Sorry.
Mayor's ready to go.
Yeah, well, okay, so I'm going to step out for a minute. The Mayor Pro Tem is going to run the meeting. I've got to do a couple things. Be sure to check your email and remember it's only for 7 days. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I love how you got that in there, Mayor. Love it. Love it. Hey, next on the agenda is, am I correct, the mobile integrated health? No, excuse me. I'm sorry. Revitalization strategies and tools to support it. Dr. Martinez and Cecilia Villegas, sorry.
And Amy, this is Barbara DeLeon. If you can stop sharing your screen, please.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Okay. I don't know if Griselda wanted to talk first. Griselda?
Celicia, she's saying go ahead. She's having mic trouble.
Okay, sounds good. She told me she wanted to speak first, so.
Celicia, so sorry I butchered your name.
Oh, that's okay. No problem.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. My name is Celicia Villegas. I'm with Economic Development. Today I bring for discussion revitalization strategies and supporting tools. Now, Mayor and Council, you should have received a list via email of some terms and acronyms, along with some links for additional information just for your reference. Sorry, there we go.
Felicia, one moment. Dr. Martinez has her hand up. Dr. Martinez, did you want to say something?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. I'm having technical issues, so I switched quickly to my phone. So before we hear Celicia, I want to give you a little bit of history of how this item came about. First of all, Celicia's assistance on redevelopment and revitalization is a new item that we incorporated in our strategic plan as of the start of this fiscal year. And that was an effort to better align our strategic plan with Elevate Las Cruces. So now we have a specific point of contact and somebody with the knowledge and expertise, and also focal point for us to entertain the conversations of how we're going to approach revitalization. And so that's a really exciting opportunity that I see for our community. And although Silicia's background was not necessarily on revitalization or redevelopment, she has demonstrated interest, knowledge, and passion to understand this complex topic. So what you're gonna see here is background information on the tools that exist, but also we have Dina Belzer. She is with Strategic Economics, and she will be speaking to best practices in the second part of the presentation. So with that, Mayor Pro Tem, I'll pass it back on to Celicia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. Okay, Celicia, thank you. You're on.
Thank you, Griselda. Thank you, Pro Tem. The city's role in revitalization is to stimulate activity when the private market is not providing sufficient capital and economic activity to achieve the desired level of improvement. The objectives from our community standpoint is that we need infrastructure and amenities, citizens need opportunities for advancement, businesses need investment for job creation, and overall we need economic prosperity. The city's role is only one piece of this puzzle. Developers, businesses, communities, and citizens all play a role in this effort. Today, we will summarize some of the common New Mexico tools in the city can use to encourage revitalization and assist in bringing projects to fruition. The district-based tools we will be looking at today are the Metropolitan Redevelopment Area, or MRA, which can include tax increment financing districts, or TIFs, and Metropolitan Redevelopment Bonds, or MRBs. Next, we have the tax increment development districts, or TIDs, and special districts, including special assessment districts, or SADs, public improvement districts, PIDs, and business improvement districts, BIDs. Other tools would include industrial revenue bonds, or IRBs, the Gross Receipts Investment Program, or GRIP, and land use and policy tools such as zoning and overlay districts. The first tool we will go over is the Metropolitan Redevelopment Area, or MRA. The purpose of this statute is to rehabilitate and redevelop areas that are deteriorated, blighted, or underutilized to stimulate economic development and community well-being. Pausing here briefly off the slide, I would like to note that Albuquerque has 24 designated MRAs. The city of Las Cruces has one in downtown, and there are several others throughout the state. One of the reasons the MRA is widely used in New Mexico for redevelopment is it provides relief from the anti-donation clause in a couple of ways. It does this by declaring that individual benefits are incidental and that the benefit to the public as a whole far outweighs this. It also allows for fair value, which is the negotiated price agreed upon by the parties rather than the typical appraised value. Going back to our slide, this relief allows for more flexibility and opens additional opportunities in areas such as public-private partnerships, or P3s, which I will discuss a little later, loans, grants, and other incentive programs, such as small-scale funds like our Renovate Main Street program, as well as other larger-scale loans for utility work or larger building improvements. Public infrastructure. Within the MRA, the city may provide small-scale city assets or infrastructure improvements to owners using the fair value provision without the complexities of a P3 development agreement. This can be done through MOUs or easement agreements, provided that there is an equal public benefit. Zoning, there is a provision to allow the city to create zoning code ordinances, amendments, and exceptions that will apply to only the MRA, which can be tailored to address revitalization needs and provide incentives to rehab or improve properties. Examples would be reduced setbacks, increased building heights, and reduced on-site parking requirements. They can also include building safety and maintenance ordinances to improve vacant buildings and discourage them to be used for storage. There are also federal, state funding and financial programs that can be used in conjunction with these incentives. Here's the process to designate an MRA. There is an initial assessment of the area, a formal designation process, development of the required MRA plan and project development, and finally implementation. I would like to go back to public-private partnerships, or P3s, and explain a little before going into some examples. As we know, in redevelopment areas, infrastructure is often in disrepair or the buildings are not in conformance. The costs and risks are often too high for the city alone or the private sector to take on projects individually. P3s would be the principal means in this case. P3 projects can be complicated and difficult in the best of situations. However, in New Mexico, it is particularly challenging without this relief from the anti-donation clause. The development agreement is a crucial part in a P3. It strengthens the planning process by encouraging private participation in revitalization and reduces the economic costs of development. It defines a project's rules, regulations, commitments, and policies for a specific period. By doing this, it reduces the risk associated with the development. Overall, these agreements should ensure that the community benefits from the P3 arrangement and promotes goals identified in the MRA plan or other policy documents. So some examples of some P3s in the state is the Lovington Drylands Brewery, in which the city owned a 2-acre vacant lot they sold to Drylands Brewing on a fair value of $100. In exchange, the developer built the pub and obligated to create 10 manufacturing jobs and 20 service jobs, supported by the new brewing and canning operation. Additional development planning was provided through funding from the New Mexico Resiliency Alliance, and Drylands also received $100,000 in state LEDA funds for the expansion, as well as local LEDA funding. Next is the Santa Rosa Elfeld Warehouse Adaptive Reuse. This historic warehouse owned by the city will be repurposed to include uses such as the Visitor Center, Route 66 Museum, affordable housing, and a business incubator through a P3. Using a development agreement with private entities such as nonprofits, retail users, or developers, the city negotiated with Guadalupe County Development Corporation to employ an economic development director to coordinate all these projects. In turn, the city will provide the warehouse and funds to employ the director. The corporation is also leasing office space, and the city agreed to allow them to sublease a portion of the warehouse. Using the fair value definition, the city provides for the first 12 months only a rent fee of $1 per month. After this time, both parties agreed to discuss the new rate fee with consideration of potential revenue sharing. Lastly, the old Albuquerque Heights lofts. The city purchased the property in 1996 after it had sat vacant for 22 years. The city received funding from the state and EPA for cleanup of the site as a brownfield and entered into a development agreement with a private developer in 2001. This development agreement helped transform the site into a mixed-use, creative reuse project with apartments, condos, retail, and office space, including the Fat Pipe co-working space. Although the project took over 25 years to come to fruition, it is now part of a larger innovation district in Albuquerque, which catalyzed development of additional mixed-use buildings to the north and the adjacent UNM Rainforest Innovate Albuquerque campus. The next type of tool we will go over are tax allocation tools. The TIF, or Tax Increment Financing District, requires an adopted MRA plan. It collects local property tax for the increment and it uses it for the revenue stream. The TID, or Tax Increment Development District, does not require the blight designation, and it can also use gross receipts tax increment as the revenue stream. So unlike TIFs, TIDs can be used in areas including greenfield developments and downtowns. Here's a table comparing some of the attributes of TIFs and TIDs. The state statute defines the purpose of a TIF as to eliminate or prevent slum and blight, where the purpose of the TID is to finance public infrastructure to support economic development and job creation. TIF's use of funds are grants and loans, where TIDs are for publicly owned infrastructure. A TIF can be up to 20 years, where a TID is up to 25. The benefit of a TIF is 100% in incremental property taxes, where a TID is up to 75% in incremental property and gross receipts taxes. The MRA receives and manages the funds in a TIF, where the TID board manages the funds for a TID. Council approves both TIFs and TIDs, however, there is an election at year 5 for a TID. The TID can also impose a property tax with the property owner's vote. Some examples of TIFs and TIDs is the Silver City Downtown TIF. The town approved a TIF district for their entire MRA plan area. The TIF district is comprised of 350 commercial parcels. The baseline was established in 2016, and the first year's increment was $1,800. The TIF is expected to generate approximately $500,000 over the course of its 20-year term. Although it's a small amount of funds generated and may seem low, the funds will potentially provide the matching and gap funding needed to finance smaller improvement projects in the district. Next is the South Valley Main Street TIF. The Bridge and Isleta Revitalization created a TIF in 2016. It includes $1.3 million in eligible projects, including the South Valley Economic Development Center property, streetscape projects, historic preservation and agricultural preservation projects, the Dolores Huerta Gateway Park, and West Side Community Center improvements. Funds have been used for several redevelopment projects, including property acquisition, roadway realignment, utility relocation, mixed-use retail and housing projects, and public parking. And last but not least is our own downtown TID, which uses the increment from provided by property taxes and gross receipts tax. Projects were first identified in the 2006 Downtown MRA Plan. The city negotiated with the state of New Mexico to receive its portion of increment revenue and Doña Ana County increment. Since formation, the TID has provided funding for projects such as streetscape improvements on Main Street, the racetrack, and funds to construct the plaza, and much more. The TID has generated more revenue for the district than originally projected, with more than half of the revenue coming from the GRT increment in contrast to the property tax increment. The addition of the state and county's portion have contributed greatly in revenue generated by the TID and have created a larger pool of redevelopment funds that can be utilized for projects in downtown. The success of the TID can be attributed to the construction of larger scale redevelopment and TID projects that have led to a significant increase in assessed property values and increased GRT revenue. Next, we have tax abatement tools. The Metropolitan Redevelopment Bond, or MRB, is a financing mechanism to support projects within an MRA. The city does not provide financing for these bonds, and the applicant is solely responsible for identifying the bond purchaser and negotiating the terms. These bonds are also taxable. Albuquerque is currently the only city in New Mexico that has set up a process for developers to apply for these benefits, and the process is similar to an industrial revenue bond process. The Industrial Revenue Bond, or IRB, is used to secure tax exemptions for larger scale economic development projects. It can be used to incentivize development. However, retail or residential uses are not allowed in the city. Counties can do retail, but not residential. For example, Albuquerque does not use IRBs to incentivize for retail, but Bernalillo County can. Here is another comparison chart. The purpose of a MRB is to eliminate or prevent slum and blight, where an IRB is to induce manufacturing, industrial, and commercial enterprises to locate or expand for eligible economic development projects. The MRB can only be used in an MRA, where an IRB can be used anywhere in the city within 15 miles of the boundary. The MRB can be for any project that meets the goals of the MRA plan, where the IRB is for projects in the specified industries. The MRB is only up to 7 years, where the IRB is up to 20. The benefit of the MRB is 100% abatement of the incremental property taxes, where the IRB benefit is 100% of real and personal property taxes, which includes base taxes. So an example of an IRB, say a company wants to build a $10 million plant and buy $15 million in equipment. The city issues a $25 million bond for 20 years. During this period, the company will repay the bond. The company gets a break on property taxes for land and building of $2.96 million over 20 years, a break on equipment property of $886,000 over 7 years, plus $769,000 compensating tax exemption on equipment purchased. Special taxing districts are another form of tool. Special assessment districts, or SADs, have been a traditional way to finance infrastructure improvements. They can be created by the provisional method or by the petition method. Some examples: the city of Las Cruces passed Resolution 1020, which was a special assessment district for North Sonoma Ranch Boulevard infrastructure and utility improvements. Council also passed a VAD, or Voluntary Assessment District, for the Metro Verde development, which is a variation of a SAD. Albuquerque approved a SAD for the Volcano Cliffs community, which was 72 acres of site work. Public Improvement Districts, or PIDs, are basically a modernized and streamlined version of the SAD process, and they can be created through a petition. Like the SAD, it is a way to finance infrastructure, and both SADs and PIDs assess a fee or tax against the properties involved. There are currently 10 PIDs in Albuquerque, as well as others in the state, and special levy revenue bonds were issued for them. Business Improvement Districts, or BIDs, are formed to receive enhanced services to improve the business climate. A fee is assessed on either the properties or the businesses. They are required to be managed by a committee that is appointed by council, and they're formed by petition from the property and business owners. Typical bid activities are marketing and promotion, maintenance and cleaning, security, policy advocacy, and small-scale capital improvements. Other districts can assist in revitalization, such as infill development overlay districts, which provide a streamlined review process for development of vacant and underutilized parcels, or those ready for redevelopment. Historical districts preserve the original character of buildings and streets while welcoming growth and innovation within those spaces. Arts and cultural districts are directed toward place-based economic development, focusing on the unique cultural and art assets of each district. And planned unit developments can also provide flexibility and assist in revitalization. Oh, what happened here? Sorry. Oh. How do I go back? Sorry about that. The last tool we will go over today is the Gross Receipts Investment Program, or GRIP. GRIP allows businesses to recover their gross receipts over a predetermined amount of time in exchange for investing in public infrastructure. The purpose of GRIP is to facilitate the attraction of large-scale retail or targeted commercial developments of businesses. It allows for an expedited permitting process, and 75% of the city's GRT is directly attributable to sales from the new business and for approved public infrastructure. Council does need to review and adopt all GRIP projects. So looking at current efforts, there has been targeted efforts such as the Downtown TID and MRA, various community plans, and the infill, historic, and arts and cultural districts. Elevate Las Cruces has identified priority areas such as El Paseo, Solano, Amador Proximo, and Apodaca. In summary, as you can see, some of the tools we cover today require extensive analysis to properly pair them with a focused area and the potential for layering them with other tools. We are confident that by collaborating with our experts in the planning department and community partners, the city can accomplish this and assist in revitalizing areas needed throughout Las Cruces. Potential recommendations for next steps would be to create a citywide plan in line with Elevate Las Cruces and our economic strategic plan to prioritize areas. Create individual implementation plans which define goals and list the tools best suited for the area, as well as other resources to provide awareness to the public. Lastly, create a maintenance plan to keep our toolkit up to date with new or changing incentives. To speak more on implementation, I will turn it over to our guest speaker and subject expert, Dina Belzer, President of Strategic Economics Incorporated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celicia. I am now going to share my screen. Let's see.
I'm sorry, but can you state your name, please?
My name is Dina Belzer, and I am the president of Strategic Economics. We are an urban economics consulting firm based in Berkeley, California, actually. So I'm zooming in from California. And I've been working with your staff since July when I did do some work with Griselda on the Royal Crossings TID. So you all have seen a memo that I wrote for you, and now you're seeing me in person.
Okay, yeah, sure. I've seen the name. I wasn't nice to put the.
Right. So
You
here
did a
I
good
am.
job. You did a great job.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope I can be helpful here today also. Can you all can see my screen? With
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So Celicia and Griselda asked me to speak today to add kind of a broader context around best practices in the use of implementation tools. And let's see.
Before you begin, Dina? Is that,
yes.
Okay. Looks like Councilor Bencomo has a question.
Okay.
Do you have a question, Councilor?
You know what I do, Mayor, and I can wait till the end of this presentation. I might just have to run before the end of this meeting, but I'm going to stick around as long as I can.
Are you sure you don't want to ask your question now, Councilor?
If you don't mind, I
don't mind.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. And honestly, maybe you would cover this, but I wonder. Oh, sorry about that. I loved that Celicia, that you had the list of priorities. Two questions are really, where are we in the process of getting the group for the El Paseo Solano corridor together? I feel like that's a huge, part of my district, and I know this project that we keep talking about. So I'm wondering where that's at, when we're going to bring that group of people together to decide which of these tools best fits. And then my other question was really around how would I, as a counselor, to be really transparent, I really have an eye on Picacho Avenue and revitalizing a pretty sizable chunk of Picacho Avenue. There's some really great stuff happening with some local artists that are really trying to grow some excitement down there, and I think the city has, plays a key role in supporting some of that. So how would I go about saying, I think this is important, and then, the Economic Development Department taking it on and saying, yes, let's do an analysis or whatnot?
Thank you, Councilor Bencomo. El Paseo,
Excuse me, Cecilia, or I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your name?
Celicia.
Can
Yes.
you state your name, please? I apologize.
Sorry,
Just the
Celicia.
person who's doing the minutes, they don't really watch the video, so they have to.
Understood, sorry. Celicia Villegas for the record. I might have to defer that, the El Paseo, where the stance is, on the ad hoc committee to David Weir. I don't know if he's on, but I know that we have been appointing some committee members.
Doesn't look like David is here.
Okay.
Larry's here. I don't know if Larry is aware of where the progress is on that.
Right. I can get back with you, Counselor, to
That'd
check.
be great. Yeah. I'm just curious if there's a date set, and I think we really want to move.
Yes.
Get the ball rolling on that for sure.
Definitely. And as far as the process, I think this is our first, stab at it. I don't know if Griselda wants to chime in on processes. That's what we have Dina here for, is how do we begin this implementation and set those priorities.
Yes. As soon as I read her title, I thought my second question might be answered by this presentation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Should I continue?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay, great. Okay, so again, this is Dina Belzer from Strategic Economics speaking, and I'll be presenting today on how to use implementation tools. So I put this slide in because when we talk about implementation without having some kind of a plan, what we're often doing is putting the cart before the horse. And I know this might seem simplistic, but as in Celicia's excellent presentation, she just went through a very dense amount of information very quickly. It was very, very clear. But when you dig down under any of those individual tools, the actual application of those tools is very complex. And so having an overarching plan or strategy is really a necessary ingredient. Or what happens is we say that you start to have a tool in search of a plan. And sometimes we get tools applied to places, or we start chasing tools that aren't really the right tool for the right place. So tools are, as I say, only effective if they follow a plan and they're targeted to specific areas. This is, I think, one of the reasons why Celicia spent so much time talking about the metropolitan redevelopment area, is because it's an area where these tools are targeted. Implementation is something that takes time and effort and energy, and you rarely apply one tool to an entire community because it won't be equally effective everywhere. So you want to really begin to think about different areas or sub areas. So this gets to Councilor Benacama's question about when will we be able to bring forward this particular area. And I don't have a specific answer to that, but to say that I have an area I want to target makes a lot of sense, because then that you begin to focus on that. So around the country, we often talk of these in terms of area plans. Now, what Celicia just talked about was doing a citywide implementation and revitalization strategy, but within that, the first step would be to target which areas would get the attention or would be the focus. And then once you identify specific areas that you want to really focus on, you want to be able to think about how you can address these multiple dimensions to understand what's going on there today, and then how do the conditions in the area begin to really match up with what we will think of as an implementation plan, which is really about the intersection of our existing conditions in the place we are, our goals for that place, and then which tools are going to be best suited to joining our existing conditions with our goals or our desired outcomes for the future. So in this planning process, the kinds of factors that are generally considered are often the existing land use pattern, transportation and mobility. How does traffic factor in, access, all these kinds of questions. When we talk about mobility, we also are thinking about active transportation. So it's not just about vehicles, but also about bicycles, walking, scooters, other things. And then other infrastructure investments. This is very germane to the conversation we were just having about when you might want to bring in sewer improvements, or when you might need to work on stormwater improvements, or you might need to improve water systems, any of the above. Housing and business support are very important, and particularly in areas that we're looking to revitalize. Often what we see is that as we begin to improve an area that might seem like it's been losing value over time, the public sector investment starts to spur private sector investment, and then the private sector investment sometimes creates pressure for existing residents or existing businesses, and they can no longer afford to stay in the area. So more and more I'm advocating for really understanding the condition of existing housing, existing households, and existing businesses, so that when we begin to implement a plan, we're really looking to support the people and the businesses that are already in the place, not just to focus on bringing in new people and new investment. And then finally, to think about what future investment looks like and what the ongoing roles between the public and the private sector will be. And again, this varies considerably. Again, Celicia did a really excellent job of describing the complexity of the P3, the public-private partnerships in the New Mexico context. And then when we begin to think about what an actual implementation plan will look like, the phasing, the timing, and the duration of the steps and stages that are involved will be an important consideration. I'll talk more about this in a minute. So again, Los Cruces already has 3 of these community blueprint area plans that are sort of the beginning of targeting areas. These are the 3 that are in Elevate Los Cruces. I know that Elevate Los Cruces was adopted relatively recently, but it sounds like there might be a desire to go back and revisit some of these things. The Apodaca blueprint is related to the area where the Royal Crossings proposal was already proposed. So that area is, I think, sort of in progress. I don't really know what's going on with Amador Proximo, but I do know that about the El Paseo corridor, the steering committee or the ad hoc committee that is in process. And now there's some conversation about pairing a study of the El Paseo corridor with the study of Solano corridor, and perhaps looking at a larger geography in the center part of the city, which would also make sense. It's important to keep in mind also that these plans were completed at different points in time. And for example, the El Paseo Corridor Community Blueprint has almost no detail to it. It doesn't have a land use map. The first strategy or action that it recommends is to update the zoning or to do a form-based code. Well, in order to do that, you would need to look at the existing land use, and you would need to understand where you might want to change the zoning in order to facilitate future development. So, and then the Apodaca blueprint, which is the most recent plan, has much more detail to it, but it has nothing, very limited implementation thinking, and there's very little connecting of what the tools are with what the conditions are to begin to really think about how to advance the goals that were put forward in that plan. So are these plans implementable? Not yet. And these are the kinds of information that we would want to look to. I just started to talk about this, like, is there zoning in place? And some of them there is, some of them are not. But there's really this question about whether or not the real estate market is active and interested in these locations, because the private investment, which is represented by revitalization, it is not always the first thing to happen. Sometimes the public sector needs to step in and make various kinds of infrastructure improvements that begin to leverage the private sector. And so then again, as I've been saying, we want to know how we can match the existing tools to match the existing conditions. And we also want to look for other partnerships. Again, this was in the case study one of the case studies that Celicia mentioned earlier, where an economic development corporation stepped in and began really running the revitalization process for the city. But it partnered with the city, it partnered with community-based organizations. And I'm going to come back to this point about partnerships in a minute. So the next step would be, for these three areas at least, would be to start to think about what a detailed implementation plan would be, or to step back and think about, as a city, do we have the right set of priority areas that we really want to focus on? Do we want to change up what our priority areas are? And we also need to keep in mind that some of the area planning documents that we have are established for a timeline that's really 10 to 20 years. So for example, the Apodaca Blueprint, which is adopted only 2 years ago, with some checking in with the community, you could find that the goals and the kind of broad outcomes that the community is looking for and that are articulated in that plan are still valid. But what's really missing is a short-term implementation strategy that looks really only at 2 to 5 years. And again, because implementation often ties specifically to market conditions and to the actual tools that are available, which change, legislation change, state legislation changes, federal legislation changes, grant programs change. And so the implementation strategy needs to be much more opportunistic and tied into the actual tools that are available. So the implementation strategies are often much more short-term than the longer term. Again, they're market-driven, they're opportunistic depending on what's available. You want to take the big improvement projects that are listed in an area plan and break them down into smaller parts. Often plans will say we need to redo the streetscape everywhere in the entire planning area, but the cost of that is millions of dollars. So in a phasing plan, you might break that down to a 2-block area and ask yourselves, what can we afford? And start small and then build on that incrementally. Again, the existing conditions in every area are not conducive to using every tool. And finally, you want to be able to use multiple tools together to really layer these tools to work together to support each other. When we think about implementation strategies, we think about implementation strategies that are in areas where the market is very strong. That's where private development leads. And then there's public sector financing, often for infrastructure, to produce the amenities. And then there are places where the real estate market is not so active, and this is where these public improvements and strategies leading to better infrastructure and amenities are then going to leverage private development. Both strategies work, and both cities can have both conditions present, but not in the same place in the city. So right now, it seems like downtown might be someplace where the private, after COVID or before COVID, not right this minute maybe, but downtown is a place where private development was starting to take off, and where some investment public investment could now leverage that. Whereas in other places, you might need to lead with the public sector financing and funding first. I'm going to talk very briefly about a case study from this Bergamot area plan in Santa Monica, California. And I know that Santa Monica probably seems like a far cry from Las Cruces. I understand that. But there is method to my madness here. Here's the city of Santa Monica. Here's the Bergamot area. The city adopted its comprehensive plan similar to Elevate Las Cruces, and the Bergamot Station area was identified as an area. And then the city went through a much more detailed planning process for this area. It happened to have a new rail line that was being built through it and a new station that was going to be in this area. So that introduction of new transit into this area was one of the reasons for selecting this particular area for the plan. But I don't want to talk about any, it's a really long plan. It's like 256 pages and it has a lot of good stuff in it, but we don't need to go through all that. My only point about this is that they did think very carefully about implementation and phasing. And in their first phase of implementation, they had 18 very specific action items that you see are broken down into relatively small pieces. They're numbered. Here you can see where each one is. And then they began to really work through which of these already could be funded through committed projects, and then began to look for other ways to fund the other kind of half of the projects. But they're not looking to deliver the entire plan. They're looking in their first phase, again, for the highest priority projects that they thought would really leverage or open up the opportunity from other development. And then I know this matrix is hard to read, but you can see this, there's a list, I'll just tell you, these are the list of all the kinds of improvement projects that they're looking for. And then here are all the different kinds of implementation mechanisms that could be applied. And you can see for some of these actions or activities, every one of these tools can be applied. For some of them, there's only one tool. And for others, there are different combinations of tools. So the only point that I want to make here again is that different combinations of tools match with different kinds of activities. And then also different combinations of tools will match with different kinds of places within the city. But we don't want to forget this idea of layering all these financing tools together. So just in starting to wrap up here, the most effective ways to implement these area plans or these priority areas where you really want to get some implementation going is first you have to work with your community on your plan. The community's engagement and input, their articulation of their vision will be very important, and it sets an important message for future investors, private investors who will come into this area. They want to know that the community is on board with them, that the community is not going to fight or resist the projects that they would do. And this actually creates greater certainty and diminishes risk for the development community, which is an important implementation tool in and of itself. Second, you want to fully understand the existing conditions, including real estate market conditions. I think I've already talked about this. Setting priorities is really important. Again, phasing, knowing what you want to get done first, what you want to get done second. Identifying improvements that address these priorities. These are the priorities are the goals of the community. What does the community want to see first? And then how do we think about improvements that can be made that can really deliver the community's priorities? Not all of these can be delivered or need to be delivered through financial investments. Some of that can be delivered through policy changes, like a change in zoning. And the city might not deliver all of these improvements. Again, there might be other partners who would do this. We have to remember that change is slow, so we have to be prepared to work at an incremental pace, especially when we're thinking about implementation. Again, relying on partners and partnerships. And then finally, dedicating staff resources to proactively move implementation forward, particularly in revitalization areas where there are a lot of complicated moving parts. Having staff who are tasked with keeping sure that the ball is rolling is an important dedication of public resources. So finally, having the tools alone are not going to get you there. So knowing what the tools are is valuable. You also need your blueprint, and you also need your team. So it takes both your plan, your tools, and your team to get you to where you want to go. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop there.
Okay, thank you. Who's Councilor Vasquez? You have a question? Councilor Vasquez.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dina, and Celicia and Dr. Martinez. This is a really exciting presentation. I think, we've all seen some of these plans give us excitement and give us hope for these redevelopment opportunities in Las Cruces, and in particular for me, I'm excited about the El Paseo corridor. Dina and I had a chance to chat before this presentation and talked about the nuts and bolts of implementation on something like the Picturing El Paseo plan that's about more than 10 years old now. And so I think part of the process piece that's really important to talk about here for me in the momentum that we've built for the redevelopment of El Paseo and now South Solano is to have this ad hoc committee perhaps be the body that works with a consultant that helps essentially choose the best opportunities through these different types of redevelopment strategies. And so certainly to me, it seems like the metropolitan redevelopment area that can really encompass and kind of house some of the other redevelopment strategies like TIFs within it would be ideal. But I think we talked also about drawing those lines around a map that would really help define what those projects would include. That would be the priority, and really would help us better understand what would work best, a TIF, what type of incentives, what areas we really want to focus on. And so, Mayor, that's one of the things I really want to get moving, is get this ad hoc committee to work with a consultant to draw the lines around a map, and then to start prioritizing the selection of a redevelopment tool and projects that are possible, so that I think we can get moving with that project sooner than later. And so I'm super excited about that. Also with Councilor Bencomo, and she mentioned the Picacho area. I think that's also a prime candidate where you already have the infrastructure, and you already have the traffic, and you have the existing retail areas where you're not building from the ground up. You're not necessarily courting a developer or recruiting new businesses, but you have existing businesses there that could just use a little bit of help and a little bit of reinvestment from the city in that particular area, that I think makes those opportunities just able to come to fruition a lot faster than building out something like the Amador Proximo, which don't get me wrong, I think it's an awesome plan, but in terms of what's ready to go and where we can make an impact, I think those are two really great areas for us to start on. So I guess my question, I just have one question really for you, Dina, and that is, what would you suggest in terms of process for a place like the El Paseo and Solano corridors to get to that narrow level of like project selection, from here until the next, I don't know, however long it might take us to do that. But in terms of process, what are some logical next steps that you think the city could take to move that mission forward?
Right. Well, I think so this is Dina Belzer again, and I did have the opportunity to chat with Councilor Vasquez about the El Paseo corridor a couple of weeks ago, and I think what we discussed then, and I think would be really great, would be to look at what geography you think would be best suited to meet the needs of both El Paseo, and if you wanted to bring the South Solano corridor in, and consider doing an area plan for the central core of the city. And then once you've identified the geography, then to start to move forward with thinking about what that existing conditions assessment would look like. How are you going to engage the community? How are you going to set a vision and a set of outcomes that the community is really looking for? And then how do you begin to match together the tools that you have, the partners that you have, and the conditions that you have to look to moving towards your goals? So it sounds simple maybe when I say it, but it's actually a lot to cover.
Thank you, Dina. And so I'm thinking for this particular group of folks and where their input would be most valuable, knowing that they are not all going to be planning experts, nor zoning experts, nor economic development experts, but certainly know that they have, this group will have certain things that they might like to see or want to see, like, what type of businesses we want to see there, what type of character this particular corridor could have, and then obviously delineating kind of those lines on the map. How do you envision a group like that working with a consultant to decide those things, and what would the ideal roles be, I guess, because I think we're still deciding what that might be.
Right. So in my experience, cities often appoint some kind of a steering committee, a public committee composed of citizens, like you're looking for your ad hoc committee, and they're often appointed by city council members. So similar to the structure that you're already looking at. And then that body becomes the sort of decision-making body, almost like a miniature planning commission or a city council, for guiding the decisions that need to be made by the plan. So for the plan. So the big decisions and the approval of the plan or the implementation strategy does go back through the planning commission and to the city council, but the decisions about what are the specific boundaries, how are we going to engage the community, are we satisfied with the analysis that we've done, sort of the moving of the process forward and giving that kind of policy input could be done by this ad hoc committee. So that would make a lot of sense.
Great. Well, thank you, Dina. I know that maybe other counselors want to weigh in, and we're running a little late here today, so I will stop there. But I just want to thank you for. Your work on this, and I think it's past time that the city starts using some of these tools, not just on El Paseo, but really taking advantage of some of these opportunities to create some economic development, some vibrancy, and really to reinvest, I think, in our infill areas, in addition to, big projects like the Royal Crossing and envisioning what the right tool is for that particular property. But thank you so much. I appreciate it, Dina, and thank you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gondara.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dina. I appreciate all your expertise, and I've already read your report on the Royal Crossing a couple of times at least, so I'm glad to meet you in person, even though it's virtual. Questions are around, as I look at the city, and all of us are, I think, jockeying into position because we each area that
Everybody
we would
has
like,
an area.
right, to see revitalized. My question is about what factors play into prioritizing these areas. I'm assuming it's some that you've mentioned, like in market, trends, transportation, those kinds of things. But are those all, or there are other factors that we should be looking at?
So this is Dina Belzer, and you ask a really great question because there's not an analytic answer to this question. The question has to emerge out of the community's priorities and the community's values. So it's really a question for you, the counselors, for your broader constituency, to decide what are the areas you want to target. And I brought forward the three community blueprint areas that are identified because those emerged up out of those three plans were sort of in process prior to two of them were in process prior to the Elevate Los Cruces, and then it looks like the Apodaca blueprint was added later. And then there are some other kind of focus areas that are also in the plan. So I would think that what you would want to do would be to go back and revisit what's already in Elevate Los Cruces and see if it's the right set of community plans, and or if you want to add in or focus in on the other priority areas, which are much smaller areas. Some of them look like they're just like corridors, and decide where you want to focus. And again, I think this is what Griselda and Celicia were suggesting, was that you sort of go back to, as a city, look at the whole city, decide which areas you really want to focus in on, and what you could do is create a phasing plan, like you would say, this year we're going to focus on these 2 areas. Next year we're going to focus on these 2 areas. The year after we're going to focus on those. And the reasons for those could be could depend on, you know, again, many things. I'm working in Buffalo, New York, of all places. I was there via Zoom this morning. It's really fun to go to New York in the morning and Mexico in the afternoon from California. There, the city is very focused on the lowest income, most disinvested part of the city. And they're really thinking about how they can bring that. And there's like no, you know, the way we think about market investment, there's very little market-driven activity there. And yet there are a lot of options and opportunities to do some really interesting and great things. So I think but that's a community priority. It's not the consultants didn't.
Yeah, I appreciate that that answer. I think so many times, right, it's consultant or city staff driven, and although we get a public, I'm really proud of the times, you know, all those plans have had rich public input,
Right.
So that, right, we've gotten recognized for that awards, you know, for those participation. So I you know, we have a lot of assets in this community for sure, and I love this city, and I think all would like to see infill, right? More emphasis on infill, and using these tools is, I think, it's a really important thing. And I think you answered my second question, and that is, have you seen cities that will do 2 or more projects in a year, that's possible? It doesn't drain, right, the city, so to speak, staff and otherwise. I think so. It's good to know that is a possible scenario, because I think there's a couple of things that we can do, and I would especially want to initiate, you know, projects that include housing. Councilor Bencomo and Flores and I sit on our Housing Policy Review Committee, and we're in great need of affordable housing. Right? I think if we don't focus on that, all the other is going to be mute at this point. So I really would like to see that as part of this process. I mean, you threw a lot of acronyms. Examples at us, and you know, I'm not a planner, but I'm really interested in really learning more about this. So I will get into, you know, really, and I read some, you know, to prepare for today. I appreciated Dr. Martinez sending the information to us prior to last week, so that we could take the time to read that. But you're right, it's so complex. It's not black and white. There's so many layers to it. And so I appreciate that, you know, all that you've been able to do. And I guess I like that, focusing on the lower income, you know, and honestly, the El Paseo, that corridor connected to the 3 of our Councilor Bencomo and I's district would probably be a good place to start. Obviously, to include the Royal Crossing, I think we want something there. And we've had people coming back, you know, Zach and company come back to us. If you're interested, let's find a tool.
Right, yeah. Well, I do want to caution you on being too aggressive. On the one hand, there's a lot of urgency to get moving quickly. On the other hand, I do want to point out that the Bergamot area plan that I showed you took 2 years, 3 years to implement, because there's a lot of research and analysis that goes into these things. And so I think this is probably also sort of a part of the conversation you as a city council and staff want to have, is how you want to allocate resources, and how you want to prioritize those things. Because you could do some things in a year, or what you could do is say, the first year we're going to do the prioritization, and we're going to pick which plan we're going to do first, which one next, and then give yourself some time. So I want to be careful about setting expectations appropriately.
No, I appreciate that, Dina.
So-
Also, I guess lastly, my last question is about our geo bonds. I know I think you're familiar with that we have bonds out. And, you know, I see this working very nicely. And when we're completing these, we're going to be seeing some completed projects that could be an opportunity for us to move in that direction and incorporating some of these projects. Do you see that often from municipalities or places that you work that they use that? I didn't see that as part of the tools.
We do. We see that all the time. Where we see, but what often happens is if you do an area plan, like and it's interesting about the trade-off between working at the area level and working at the city level, because geobonds, as you know, are for the entire city. And so sometimes what a plan will do is it'll set specific priorities for certain kinds of investments, and then those will go into the geobond, you know, the capital improvements planning cycle that comes up next. Or in the case where affordable housing is a big priority, sometimes cities pass bond measures just for affordable housing. And that often emerges out of doing area planning like this. So there's sort of a give and take between the local area planning and the citywide planning. They're not mutually exclusive, but they're not always sequential in one coming first and one coming second.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Dina. Thank you so much for spending time with us and your expertise. That will be it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dina, for your presentation. It was quite elevating. I think it's good. I lived in Los Angeles for many years, just east of Santa Monica. So I'm entirely very familiar with Bergamot Station, and it actually, I don't know when it was finally when the end product. What was the date of that project?
I want to say it was 2018.
2018. Well, the movement to get it going was in the, I think 2000 early on.
I want to say, you know what, I'm going to go back and check on that. I think it was,
maybe even because
it was before that. Yeah, it was probably 2016.
Oh, it was, but there was a movement prior and
before the gold line, before the expo line opened.
Yeah, the expo line was being opposed to. People from Beverly Hills were adamantly opposed to it. And it finally went in after I moved here. So, and I've been here for 8 years. So, I mean, permanently here. I bought in 2005. But anyway, I think it's very good that you caution us not to move too quickly on these things, because they just don't move that quickly. And I think with Bergamot Station, I guess you got on in 2016, and there was such a drive already, such a community drive. And right now I'm in the process of seeking one representative on that El Paseo corridor panel in community, and it's hard to find somebody. And so it isn't like, I think that the corridor plan, El Paseo corridor plan, was pretty much started, I might be wrong, Mayor can correct me on this, by Sharon Thomas. And it did take some community, but it's been really people, and she's Mayor Pro Tem Emeritus at this point. So somehow I feel that, and because you picked Bergamot, so now I can actually speak to that because I lived there. I saw it. I saw people talking. So I think that the difference between Bergamot and Las Cruces is like, there's a significant difference as to what drove it to happen, what propelled it to happen. We have people, the city planners, city officials, the elected officials, who have vision, want to see certain things done, but it's not really coming from the community per se. I mean, all of us are from, quote, the community, but not really. So anyway, yes, I think it's going to be a slow process to really get it going. And,
well, one thing to keep in mind is that if the ad hoc committee, if you can't find people to serve, enough people to serve on the ad hoc committee, but it's still a priority of the council to get moving, start with the people you do have and work on a broader engagement process so that more people have more of an idea of why they would want to be involved and what would be at stake for them. And then you might see the momentum build. So I'm just suggesting that that you might not have to wait until you can fill every slot on that ad hoc committee to get started.
Good idea. Thank you so much, Dina.
Thank you. I'm glad Bergamot resonated with somebody.
Yeah, and I lived in the Bay Area in San Francisco.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, a lot of demonstrations there in the day.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dina. Was there more?
Not from me.
No. Okay, well, let's just go home then. No, I'm just kidding.
That was the end of our presentation.
I will say, Mayor, that having worked all over the country, I have really enjoyed working with your staff and with the community members that I have met. And I feel like you all have just a really wonderful resource in terms of who you all are. And I really appreciate being invited to be part of that. So thank you for having me today.
You're welcome. Thank you. We may be calling you back for another presentation on your analysis of the Royal Crossings TID. Okay, so Celicia, that's it?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, well, then if there's nothing further, Barbara or David, then we'll go ahead and call for to adjourn this meeting, and then we'll do the agenda setting meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Who made the motion?
Cassandra?
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem made the motion, second by Councilor Flores, that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying, oh, that's right, Christine. And you got to call it. That's one thing I learned in that Open Meetings Act, so.
Right. Good to know.
Good to know.
This is on the motion to adjourn the work session. Councilor Abeyta-Stube.
Yes.
Councilor Vasquez.
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo.
Yes.
Councilor Sorg.
Yes.
Councilor Flores.
Yes.
Councilor Gandara.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, and Gina, are you still there? Or she left? I was gonna say, I've heard of the cart before the horse, but I've never seen a picture of it, so that was pretty cool. Okay, so we're not gonna, I'm gonna stick around for Christine. You guys are welcome to do the agenda setting meeting, and then we're done.
Thank you, Mayor. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Mayor.
Good night. Thank you.
I'm ready when you are.
You are? Okay. So this is the agenda setting meeting for the November 2nd, 2020 City Council meeting. Number 1, non-consent.
1, non-consent.
2, consent.
2, consent.
3, consent.
3, consent.
4, non-consent.
4, non-consent.
5, consent.
5, consent.
6, non-consent.
6, non-consent. Thank you. Have a good night.
Hey, you too.